At the beginning of the story, Count Benjamin Ishpein is reciting his wedding vows, promising love and loyalty to his wife, his voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear clearly. Our heroine thinks to herself, why do people only realize what happiness is after it's far beyond their reach? Her father, as indecisive as ever, and naturally, despite all the arguments and drama, her stepmother is the only one who is genuinely sad for her. Although she had always ignored them, her stepsisters and younger brother still showed her their affection. She finally realizes that she never understood how important her family was to her. Suddenly, someone calls Helena's name, telling her it's her turn to say her vows. It's her brand new husband speaking to her. That bastard is staring daggers at her, smiling like he's won the lottery. The heroine thinks to herself, laugh all you want, buddy, while you still can. Helena Winston, or Countess Ishpein, as she should now be called, vows to drag that bastard to hell. It all began a month ago at the Emperor's banquet, when Helena was playing chess with a friend. Our heroine was bickering with her childhood friend, Crown Prince Rufus Alpina, saying she didn't want to get married. She was afraid of losing herself and becoming a different person after marriage. Helena toyed with a queen chess piece between her fingers, comparing herself to her mother, Lady Sandra, who had abandoned her. The Crown Prince told her that she had always been one of a kind, just like Sandra in the mural at the Golden Rose Theater, always on her tiptoes, gazing into the distance. Although Rufus was the next in line for the throne, he admitted he was afraid of losing Helena because he admired her free spirit. Then, without warning, he grabbed her hand and began to shower her with praise. She felt something was wrong, told him to let go, and try to pull away, but Rufus was too strong. Helena grabbed the chessboard box from the table, warning him that if he said one more word, she wouldn't be responsible for the consequences. Just as Helena was about to swing the box, the guy blurted out that he was in love with her, and he was serious. The heroine was completely stunned, but what truly shocked her was that the Crown Prince's fiancé suddenly appeared. Poor Adela Biled screamed, demanding to know how His Highness could do this to her. Then, a booming female voice was heard, and it turned out to be Rufus's mother, Empress Clarice Alpin. The Empress wanted to know what on earth was going on. Her appearance caught everyone off guard, not just Helena, but Rufus as well. And so, the heroine found herself caught in this huge misunderstanding. She told herself to control her emotions, because even in a lion's den, one could survive by staying calm. She decided she had to be smart and calm, and explain to everyone, step by step, that this had nothing to do with her. Helena had her whole speech planned out, but Rufus suddenly shouted that he didn't want to marry his fiancée. He said outright that he loved Helena, and our heroine was utterly speechless. She couldn't understand what nonsense this madman was spouting and could only silently pray that no one would believe a single word of his ravings. But unfortunately, Rufus's fiancée was already a crying mess. The Empress ordered her son and future daughter-in-law to follow her, and Helena stammered that she wanted to explain as well. But Her Majesty the Empress paid her no mind, only saying she would decide what to do with her later. The Empress ordered the girl to return to her room and await her fate. And just like that, this absurd and terrible incident occurred, completely upending the heroine's life. A few days later, our heroine wandered into the royal gardens, which were as magnificent and breathtaking as ever. Lost in thought, she realized she couldn't even remember the last time she had been here. Eventually, Helena approached a small table where the Empress was having tea. The Empress greeted the girl, saying it had been a long time since she'd seen Helena. She added that she hadn't expected them to meet for such a grave reason. The heroine's parents' instructions flashed through her mind. Her father had told her to kneel and sincerely apologize to Her Majesty the Empress. Her mother, on the other hand, advised Helena to absolutely not mention that crybaby wimp Rufus, because the Empress was, first and foremost, a loving mother. The girl scoffed inwardly, wondering what kind of person her parents took her for. She was convinced all she needed to do was explain everything clearly. Helena calmly stated that Her Majesty need not worry, and the Empress replied that she believed her. The heroine was ecstatic and began to thank Her Majesty for her understanding, but the Empress cut her off, revealing that rumors of the Crown Prince's secret love affair had already spread and the royal family's reputation was at stake. She then asked Helena how she intended to clean up this mess. At this, the heroine began to beg Her Majesty for guidance, asking what on earth she should do. The Empress gave her order. The girl must marry the man she had chosen for her. Our heroine was stunned and asked if she could perhaps leave the capital for a while to a convent or something. The Empress confessed that she had long been tracking a dangerous organization that threatened the peace of the empire. After following their movements, the Empress discovered they were connected to Count Benjamin Ishpein, but he was as cautious as a bird and as fierce as a beast, so Her Majesty had never known how to approach him. Helena fearfully asked what the Empress meant. The Empress said the only way was for Helena to marry the Count and become his closest confidant. Then, according to the Empress, Helena could uncover all his secrets and report back to her. The girl couldn't accept becoming Her Majesty's spy. She clutched her skirt in fear, wanting to object, but Her Majesty stated sternly that it was an order, and moreover, it was an honorable mission for the sake of the empire. She promised Helena that if she succeeded, she would be celebrated throughout the empire as the greatest hero of all time. Then, she would grant her a noble title, vast lands, and complete freedom, something no woman in the country had ever possessed. Her Majesty concluded by saying this was Helena's chance to live the life she had always wanted. The heroine had never had any illusions about marriage. She had never dreamed of some great romantic love. People around her thought it was the most opportune time to get married, but Helena didn't understand what good it would do. They also said things would be bad if Helena didn't marry, but she couldn't figure out just how bad it could be. They said marriage was a woman's destiny and happiness, but she completely disagreed and couldn't see the good in it. Helena saw it as just a meaningless ritual that she had never wanted since she was a child, and she had never planned to marry. At that moment, the Empress's words and her command to marry the man of her choosing flashed through Helena's mind. The girl concluded that this was all because of her naivety. To her, marriage had always been like a life sentence. It was like the blade of a guillotine hanging over her head, waiting for the right moment to fall. However, if Helena could get a title, land, and freedom, marriage would no longer be an obligation. It would become a choice. And if she got divorced, no one would want to marry her afterward. But if Helena was going to be dragged into this hell anyway, she might as well make the most of this opportunity. The night before the wedding, she thought about how these were her last days waking up in this house. Strictly speaking, marriage wasn't the real purpose of this deal, but she still felt strange. Was this pre-wedding anxiety? Then Helena wondered, why did Count Ishpein accept the marriage proposal so quickly? Even a debt collector would move slower. He was supposed to be as cautious as a bird and as fierce as a beast, yet he wanted to marry her. Maybe there was something wrong with him. Helena pulled the ornaments from her head, thinking angrily, why did the maids have to put all this junk in her hair? The girl said today was nothing special and ordered them to do everything as usual. The maid agreed, but added that it really suited her. As the heroine left her room, her half-sister Ella Winston and younger brother Henry Winston gathered around. Henry asked his sister Helena what day it was and why she looked so pretty. Ella laughed at her brother, saying he was so slow because everyone knew today was the celebration for their sister to meet her fiancé. Helena said Ella was absolutely right, that all this chaos was because of her wedding. Then she asked her siblings why they were so dressed up too. She had told the maids to dress everyone as usual, but they were all dressed up anyway. Suddenly, someone sternly told Henry and Ella to stop hugging their sister, or they would wrinkle her wedding dress. It was the eldest sister, Elisa Winston. The first half-sister was also there. Helena told her to be easier on the kids, then asked what she was reading, but the title was about exit clause issues in trade history. Elisa said she had recently become interested in finance. The heroine told her sister Elisa that she was the pride of the Winston family, practically a genetic mutation. Elisa asked if she and her sister would still see each other often. She added that even though everyone thought the girl was lucky, she really didn't want Helena to leave the capital. She blurted out that her sister had done nothing wrong and it wasn't fair. But Helena laughed and said it wasn't that bad. The heroine revealed a secret to her sister, saying she planned to become a spy, gain fame and fortune, and asked if it wasn't a brilliant idea. But Elisa declared she would never speak to Helena again, which Helena guessed was because they were half-sisters. Elisa told her to stop bringing up that crap. Just then, a few maids ran in, shouting that something terrible had happened, that Count Ishpein had arrived. They revealed that the Count was apparently a very handsome man, and the rumors weren't lying. Helena thought to herself, this is trouble. At this rate, all eyes at the party would be focused only on Count Ishpein. The maid asked where Miss Helena was going. She ordered them to immediately bring back all the accessories they had just removed from her hair and dress. The heroine didn't want to be upstaged at today's celebration, so she had to dress to the nines. The maids exclaimed they would make everything perfect. Henry and Elisa grumbled that they would leave and stay out of the way. Only Ella looked at her sister with adoring eyes, not wanting to leave. The elaborately dressed Helena posed in front of the mirror, while the maid smiled and said Miss Winston was as dazzling as ever. A young man at the party confessed to Helena, saying that even if she became another man's wife, she would always be his queen. But Helena was busy thinking that since she was being forced into this marriage, on one hand, it wasn't bad that her husband was handsome, but on the other hand, in a situation where a girl was about to betray someone, her young husband's good looks could be a hindrance. Suddenly, Count Ishpein appeared in the hall, and the girl froze in shock because he was truly, unbelievably handsome. Helena couldn't understand how a man like that could have been hiding in some southern village and remained unmarried until now. Her future husband approached, kissed her hand, and said he was Benjamin Ishpein at her service. Then he asked Miss Winston if he could have the first dance. At first, she was overwhelmed by her handsome husband's charm, but she quickly composed herself, smiled, and replied that she was sure no one would mind if they danced all night, since after tonight, they would be husband and wife. While dancing, Helena realized she was doomed. She had failed completely because she couldn't even control herself now. The Count apologized for his clumsiness, saying he had never danced at such a high society event before. Helena stammered that for a beginner, his steps were perfect. The young man said he had actually practiced just for today. Our heroine thought to herself that her brand new husband had a ridiculously handsome face, a hot body, and was gentle, charming, and charismatic. This was a disaster. Helena could already picture herself apologizing to the Empress, saying she had messed up the mission because it might not be the Count who fell in love, but her. The girl told her husband that she hadn't danced in a long time and was feeling a bit dizzy. The Count suggested Miss Winston take a break, as the night was still young. The Count's words naturally took our heroine by surprise. While resting, Helena thought about Her Majesty's words, that Count Ishpein was connected to a dangerous organization threatening the Empire's security. She was sure her gentle husband couldn't possibly be involved, but if there was even a hint of evil in him, Helena could handle it. She vowed to do everything in her power to ensure he would never harbor such evil intentions. The reflection in the glass once again showed the Count talking to his aide. This blond man was the only attendant the Count had brought and seemed to be his right-hand man. The girl wondered where the Count and his aide were going and decided to follow them. After all, this was still her territory, and she had every right to know what the Count was discussing with his right-hand man in this secluded spot. Perhaps the newlyweds were talking about Helena, and she certainly wanted to know his true feelings. I overheard the aide say that from the look on the Count's face, he seemed to have taken a liking to his new wife. Helena thought, no kidding, that's not surprising. To him, she was practically an angel. She had clearly stolen his heart with her dazzling charm. But the Count snapped sharply, nonsense. Her eyes widened. What on earth was he talking about? He explained that it was a marriage of convenience. Besides, he hated nobles, and his wife was just a typical spoiled noblewoman. The Count continued, saying he couldn't stand her flirtatiousness and how she acted like royalty. It was pathetic. The aide told him to keep his voice down, lest someone overhear. Then he asked if the Count really disliked her that much. He replied that she was insignificant. It wasn't about like or dislike. He just found nobles disgusting. The blond man said that at this rate, a divorce was just around the corner. The Count replied that by then her dowry would be gone, and Helena would go back with nothing. The Count's secretary said the budget was tight, the dress rental was expensive, and we have to check if the Countess's return fare was included. The heroine returned to the hall, where all the guests flocked to congratulate her on her new marriage. A blonde girl said she saw the newlyweds dancing, and they looked like a match made in heaven. A man chimed in, saying there was no happier day than today. Helena apologized to everyone, explaining that she wasn't feeling well and was going to her room to rest. All the guests smiled understandingly, but no one could have imagined that a minute later, Miss Helena would collapse on her bed in tears, cursing her husband. She was shocked that the Count was such a scumbag, seducing her before the ceremony and already planning his betrayal. So that smile wasn't because he was charmed by his young wife. The Count just saw her as a walking money bag. Helena was furious. How could she, the most desirable woman in the capital, fall for a man like that? Even for a second. The very thought made her burn with anger. But then she decided this was for the best. She had almost been fooled by the fancy packaging without seeing the rot inside. This wasn't some romance novel. This was war. She imagined the Count on his knees, begging for mercy once she exposed all his dirty dealings. But even if the Count wagged his tail at Helena's feet, it wouldn't save him. She told herself to stop thinking about useless things and get ready for bed. The wedding was early tomorrow, and she had to get to that godforsaken place. But I can't sleep yet. I need to wash up and change. But when she opened her eyes again, she found she had fallen asleep just like that, with her makeup on, her hair done, and her gorgeous dress all wrinkled. Suddenly, there was a noise, seemingly from the balcony. Could it be a thief? Though, no one should be foolish enough to rob the Winston estate. She cautiously asked if anyone was there, but was answered by someone calling her name. Then she bravely opened the door and saw Rufus grinning. She demanded to know what on earth he was doing here. The guy said he came to apologize, which only made Helena angrier. She gave him a piece of her mind, asking if it took him this long to finally realize he was partly responsible for her being forced to marry. Rufus started making excuses, saying he was being followed. He wanted to come sooner, but couldn't, and he didn't just come to apologize. He confessed that he wanted to reveal the truth about Benjamin Ishpein, and Helena asked if he was just a broke man with bad character. Rufus was stunned. He wanted to know how she knew, but Helena ignored him, asking if Rufus thought she'd give him a medal. She said this fiancé was thanks to Her Majesty the Empress, and Rufus told her not to push him too hard. It was high up here. Helena declared she couldn't care less and turned to order him out. The guy begged her to wait because he wanted to ask her to trust him and elope together. The heroine pounced on him, demanding he say something that made sense. But Rufus told her to calm down because he had a plan. Helena's tone softened. She even considered the idea of eloping. But then what? Who would clean up the mess? The guy replied that they would ruin the Bild family's reputation and destroy Count Ishpein's family. At this, Helena's eyes lit up because if she, the very picture of loyalty, ran away, the Count would suffer. Helena liked that idea, but the girl's joy was interrupted by Rufus's confession that she was the most important person in the world to him and that he truly loved her. At that moment, the girl remembered all the crap this guy had said before and wondered what she was dreaming of, because this was Rufus, after all. Meanwhile, the young man was telling Helena that they would have only each other, free from all the shackles and burdens of this world, and escape to true freedom. The girl told the guy to calm down because the balcony was narrow, and if he started to fall, she wouldn't catch him. Suddenly, the girl heard Count Ishpein's voice, demanding to check on Miss Winston's safety immediately, as he had seen a strange shadow on the balcony. The heroine decided to slip back into her room, while the maid tried to dissuade the Count. The maid said it was improper, as he wasn't married to the young lady yet. To hell with propriety. The Count burst in, and Helena was furious, saying he was like a barbarian barging into a bride's room the night before her wedding. The Count retorted that he was marrying Miss Winston in a few hours, so what was the big deal? Then he added that the real problem seemed to be standing behind her. He ordered the girl to step aside, saying he needed to check the balcony. All right, folks, let's delve into the mind of Count Ishpein. Nobility, family, and marriage were not things he was interested in at all, but he needed them, so he just went for them. Benjamin knew that a man like him couldn't afford any unrealistic expectations. So, no matter how charming the woman he was to marry was, he needed to keep a cool head, because Benjamin was dealing with an arrogant young lady who knew nothing of the real world, and she was embroiled in a scandal with the crown prince. From the way so many men always flocked around her, it was obvious what kind of person she was. Even if Helena's smile could blind you, there was no way she could ever capture Count Ishpein's heart. While strolling in the palace gardens, the Count's attention was drawn by some noise. Benjamin looked up and saw a man on Miss Winston's balcony. He wasn't even surprised, just thought to himself that it was a good thing he hadn't had any hopes to begin with. Now back to the present. Our heroine was angry, wondering why the Count still wanted to check the balcony since everything was fine. The Count told his future wife that she was a terrible liar, and she retorted that there was really nothing there. She yelled that if the Count kept this up, she would call the servants. Benjamin thought to himself, if this is how Helena is reacting, there must be someone there. He told her to stop lying, stop being a coward, and come clean. But Helena was provoked and asked if the Count was insulting her. The heroine screamed with all her might to stop Benjamin, but a second later, she was relieved when she saw Rufus down below. Safe and sound. It seemed he was fine thanks to the railing. The Count asked in a calm voice if that was the Crown Prince, and Helena admitted that Prince Rufus had come, uninvited. She protested. What else could she have done? Benjamin said sadly that it seemed the rumors were true, but Helena argued that it wasn't like that. She said it was all a fabrication, as she and the Crown Prince had been friends since childhood. Benjamin asked her why she kept his secret, sarcastically questioning if childhood sweethearts exchanged secret greetings that couldn't be shown to others. The girl retorted, asking how she could have announced such a thing to the world, while the Count, furious, demanded to know how she could open the door for someone who broke in the middle of the night. The girl explained that she only opened the door because she thought leaving the Crown Prince outside would attract more attention, to which Benjamin commented that he was finally seeing just how shameless his new bride was. The Count sternly declared that from now on, Helena had better behave, as he did not want to witness such a disgrace again. His final words to his future wife were a warning. Do not break the vows we are about to make. Our heroine was seething with anger. These words were coming from Count Ishpein, the very man who planned to abandon her after squandering her fortune. And just like that, Helena Winston found herself in this messy predicament. She couldn't help but recall yesterday when Benjamin warned her not to tarnish the promises made when a couple marries. But who was the first to break those promises? Wasn't it the penniless man who wanted to get rich off Helena's dowry? Most importantly, he was a rude barbarian and an uncultured pig. If his inner life was so dark, he must be mixed up with some dangerous people. Suddenly, the bastard interrupted her thoughts, reminding her it was time to say her vows. She swore to love him and only him forever, while secretly vowing to uncover her husband's secrets, whatever they may be, and bring him down. She promised herself she would do whatever it took to achieve this goal, even if he ended up on his knees, begging for mercy. The moment the priest loudly declared the two of them husband and wife before God, Helena was already thinking, "Buddy, you'd better not expect any mercy from me." A few hours later, our heroine stood before the north gate of Aduras, the only passage between the north and the south. Basically, once she passed through this gate, she would be leaving the south and entering directly into enemy territory. Helena said she was fully prepared, and Benjamin asked if this was her first time using a portal. He told her to stay alert, but in her mind, she thought, "No need to remind me, hubby, I'm wide awake." Suddenly, everything before our heroine's eyes began to spin. She eventually arrived at the south gate of Laringen in the Duchy of Russell, severely dizzy. Helena decided to pull herself together, as from here, she just needed to take a carriage, but she had no idea what awaited her. Then, her new husband revealed a strange smile and said, "Welcome to Ishpein Castle, Miss Winston." The girl held her head in disbelief, realizing the real nightmare was just beginning. Our heroine was completely stunned and blurted out, "Okay, it looks like a castle, but why is half of it missing?" The Count just shrugged, not exactly missing, just a little scorched. She was dumbfounded. "A little? This is much more than a little." Then she asked, "Does anyone still live here?" The Count replied, "Strange question. Of course, it's habitable. And you, Helena, will be living here too." And so, Helena Winston, born the daughter of a count who had always lived in a warm, safe, clean, and comfortable home surrounded by well-trained servants, ended up here. Now, Helena was trapped in a soot-covered castle with a bunch of clumsy servants. When Maid tried to help the lady with her hair, she snapped, "Go away, I'll do it myself." Meanwhile, Helena was planning her next move. First, find a key to stopping the evil forces threatening the Empire. Then, she would escape from here. She had thought she could just get by, but the sound of a trunk crashing to the floor interrupted her. Helena turned and sighed in annoyance. Were these servants trained at all? Were they always this careless with guests? She prayed to God in her heart. Was he really going to tie her to these people? Helena tried to figure out her next move and decided to first set some ground rules for the staff. She explained that the key to managing the castle was cleanliness, like at least dusting and clearing out cobwebs regularly. She said she knew conditions were difficult, but if they were to host guests in the future, they would need to replace the old bedding and bathtub. She concluded that taking care of the castle and its people should be a source of pride for the staff, so they needed to step up their game. Suddenly, the Count appeared and said, "That's enough." He told the staff to leave, as there was no need to cater to the lady's whims. Helena was annoyed. What do you mean, Wims? I was just pointing out what the servants should be doing. Benjamin retorted that she shouldn't expect the same standards as the Winston estate here, as there were no servants who could meet the lady's expectations. He added that pride in a noble family was all well and good, but the lady should know that not everyone sees it that way. The girl asked who she should go to if she needed anything, and he replied that Helena could come to him. At this, the girl's spirits lifted. She hadn't mentioned the most important thing yet, so she was going to tell him now. She explained to Benjamin that she needed a cup of pink dew every morning or her whole day would feel off. Naturally, the Count was shocked. Helena then thought to herself about her blockhead husband. Now, this is a whim. Benjamin asked if Helena was some kind of fairy, to which she replied, something like that. The Count stated flatly that he would ignore such a request. The girl exclaimed that this was unbelievable. Not only could she not train the servants, but now her requests were to be ignored as well. The heroine yelled that her husband was a complete megalomaniac. The Count, in turn, said that Helena Ishpein should get used to the new way of life, as there were no parents here to satisfy her every whim. No maids to cater to Miss Helena's willfulness. So he told his wife to get used to mornings without royal treatment. She sneered that he was sorely mistaken and that he was the one who needed to adjust, because a Count who manages family estate like this was the real problem. She asked, how can someone who can't even take responsibility for himself call himself an adult? Right, crybaby Count. He snapped back, telling her to think whatever she wanted. She was provoked and said she was planning on it. Then she added that it was obvious a Count who hated whims wouldn't dare share a bed with a spoiled brat. Benjamin told Helena not to worry. He wouldn't come near her even if she begged, and besides, he didn't sleep in a bed anyway. She said her husband had at least one redeeming quality, so she would have the bed to herself, and he'd better not even think about coming near it. Helena tossed and turned for a long time, and Benjamin thought to himself, she looks so tired, how is she not asleep yet? He cut off his own thoughts, telling himself not to mind her, because the moment he started to care, he had already lost. Suddenly, Helena sat up in bed and asked why there was a table here instead of a dressing table. Ben complained that first it was the dew and now a dressing table. The girl explained that she needed to hold on to something to fall asleep, otherwise she would definitely have nightmares even if she did, but because it was a table, her hand had nowhere to go. There's a large gap between it and the bed. It's not connected, but a dressing table is flush against the wall, though there's still a small space. The young man protested. Where was he supposed to find a dressing table in the middle of the night? Besides, you can't just swap out furniture. Ben told her to close her eyes and count sheep, certain his dear wife would fall asleep before she even reached 10. But Helena said sadly that the problem was she couldn't, which was why she was asking him. Then she added that being alone in a place like this, she might have already gone mad. Ben asked why this know-it-all didn't just solve the problem herself. He snapped that she shouldn't drag him into it, and that she should shut up because he couldn't concentrate on his documents. Helena kept looking at him sadly, and then he exploded. Is it really that important to stick your hand into something? He said in frustration that there was no other way. Helena screamed, asking him, what are you doing? Why are you getting into bed? Benjamin said his wife was complaining she couldn't sleep, so he was here to help her, guaranteeing she would sleep like a baby. The heroine realized it was time to admit she had no resistance to handsome men. But Helena immediately warned herself not to fall for it again. She asked her husband what he meant and what he meant by helping when suddenly the guy grabbed her hand. Benjamin explained that he would lie here until she fell asleep. Helena asked happily, is that all you meant by helping? But the guy replied that she would definitely have to pay a price for this favor. Helena could only say fine, but this didn't mean she had lost. She just had no other choice. And she asked him why he didn't sleep in the bed. Helena then prayed he wouldn't suddenly say it was because of her. Benjamin asked in surprise, why would he say that? Helena explained that it's hard to fall asleep with a beauty like her lying next to someone. But the young man coldly replied that it had nothing to do with her. She asked in frustration what the problem was, and the guy explained that the bed was uncomfortable. Benjamin said he had been a mercenary for a long time, and back then, on the brutal battlefield, he couldn't let his guard down and always slept curled up with his sword across his chest. But even so, the guy still held on to a faint hope, probably just childish optimism. Benjamin glanced at his wife and saw that she was already asleep. He was moved by the sight. Helena's sleeping form was so carefree. It was almost enviable. In the morning, our heroine woke up, thinking how well she had slept better than she had in a long time. Well then, it was time to begin the elegant morning of Helena Winston or rather, Lady Ishpein. But first, a cup of pink dew. However, the rope to summon a servant snapped and was left in her hand. Well, she concluded sadly, this wasn't a dream, it was all real. Suddenly, Helena thought, what the hell, why are my clothes under the bed? Then she went to the window and saw Count Ishpein practicing his swordsmanship. Helena felt her new husband looked completely out of place here, at least his appearance did. The heroine reached out to touch the window, but the glass cracked easily. She was bewildered. Who on earth was taking care of this godforsaken place? An angry Helena had to go downstairs to find any servant and ask who was in charge. A frightened-looking maid promised her she would go find someone right away. After a while, the cook came to Helena, and she asked if he was the butler. He said he was actually about to be promoted to head of the vegetable department, but now he was the only one here, so he figured he was in charge for the time being. He added that he wasn't really in charge of everything. He had just lived at the Ishpein estate the longest, so he knew a lot. Helena sighed and said, I see, so there's no butler. Then she guessed that if he had been here for a long time, he must know when the fire happened. She wanted to know the cause of the fire and why they hadn't cleaned up the site yet. The boy said the fire was 5 years ago, but honestly, he didn't know much about it. He said his father was sick, so he went back to his hometown for 2 weeks, and when he returned, everything was like this. The servants he worked with were gone. The castle was full of mercenaries, and it was a mess. These scary mercenaries asked him for food, so he made them something to eat. Then, a ridiculously handsome man, the current count, said they would probably need at least one cook. The count decided to hire the boy, and, just like that, he became the only cook in this castle. Lady Helena asked if the boy knew what happened to the castle while he was away. Jones said he heard the old count and his entire family died in the fire. But that was all he knew. I'm inclined to believe the kid. He probably has no reason to hide the truth. The people who worked here 5 years ago were all dismissed, leaving no one who knew the truth, which means someone wanted to cover things up. The lady asked the young man if he understood how chaotic Ishpein Castle was right now. The young cook said he did, and the lady then declared that as the mistress of this house, she would not let the castle remain this way. But she couldn't restore the family's honor alone. Just then, Jones remembered that the former butler, Mr. Kurt, had visited 3 years ago. He said that if the young cook ever needed help, he could find him at a specific address. So, our heroine went to that place, where she met a young blonde man, and Lady Ishpein introduced herself. The young man said it was a great honor to meet her, and Helena pointed out that this young gentleman was unlikely to be Sir Kurt. The blonde man introduced himself as Joe Wilton, explaining that he was looking after the place for Sir Kurt. He then handed the lady a letter from Sir Kurt, which said that his family loved the Count's family and the beautiful castle that sat on the green hill. The letter also said that even if the noble family of Ishpein had long since fallen, whoever received this letter should help it regain its glory. Lady Helena thought to herself that she had come too late. Mr. Kurt was already dead. The boy explained that Sir Kurt had held on, hoping someone from the Ishpein family would return. He said that in the meantime, the old man had taught Joe everything he knew, all his experience. He had been tending to this garden ever since Sir Kurt passed away. The girl realized with a pang that she was too late, then corrected herself in her thoughts. Not her exactly. It was Benjamin. It was tradition for servants to work with pride for the family that protected their land. A nobleman took full responsibility for his domain so that his people could serve him with pride. A community united by its love for the land. That's what a noble family and its members should be. Helena told herself she didn't deserve any of this. The boy added that he doubted Mr. Kurt would have returned to the Count's estate even if he were still alive. The lady wondered why he said no. Joe repeated Mr. Kurt's words. The current Count would never forgive anyone from the old estate. The girl asked in surprise, what can't Benjamin forgive? Is he talking about what happened 5 years ago? Then she asked if the old man had mentioned anything else. The guy shook his head, saying the old man only mentioned a big fire and that he could never go back to the Count's estate. Joe thought sadly that the old gentleman had lost his mind at the end. The Countess said with regret that she understood. Joe then knelt before the lady and begged her to allow him to return to the Count's estate. He added that he understood her possible mistrust, but he had been waiting for this opportunity, hoping to repay Mr. Kurt's kindness by dedicating himself to the estate. Lady Helena asked how she could know if this guy was a competent servant. Joe asked for one day to gather enough people to run the castle at a minimal level. After that, Lady Helena could decide whether to hire the boy. The Countess agreed to wait that long. Meanwhile, near the house where our heroine was talking with the blonde kid. Her bodyguard was waiting for her. She suddenly said they needed to go somewhere quickly, and the bodyguard followed. Who would have thought the place he and the lady were going was where the former butler had lived? Then Lady Helena pushed the door right open. The guy asked what was wrong, and the Countess announced that by tomorrow morning they would have a new butler. She told him to inform everyone in the castle. The bodyguard then asked her how she knew where the old butler lived, since she had never been here before. He pointed out that she wasn't surprised, as if she had expected it. Helena replied that he was right. She explained that the size of the garden was different, but the layout and structure were exactly the same. It was clear that someone desperately wanted the Count's residence to be restored, because it's difficult to recreate a huge and complex garden in such a small space. Every detail had to be meticulously planned. The Countess mentioned that the old butler must have missed Ishpein Castle very much. Then she added that, in any case, she owed Mr. Kurt a huge favor. Back home, the heroine thought that this castle was a nightmare. Helena hoped that when a young man showed up as the new butler, things might actually improve. She didn't even want to think about the finances. There was so much to repair, and it would cost a fortune. Suddenly, the guard approached the lady and announced that they had arrived. Lady Helena asked if she remembered correctly that the guard's name was Aaron and that he used to be a mercenary like Lord Benjamin. After the guy confirmed the lady's words, she wondered if all Southern mercenaries were this polite or if Aaron was just an exception. Naturally, the guy was very flattered by this question and replied that he was just an ordinary mercenary. He added that he just had a lot of sisters who always told him to be nice to women. The Countess wanted to know more about his sisters. Aaron explained that he became a mercenary to help raise dowries to marry off his sisters. Well, Helena commented that this guy was a really good person since he was willing to sacrifice himself for a damn dowry. Suddenly, the topic of dowries reminded the heroine of something, and she yelled at Aaron, asking when the Count would be back. The young man noticed a groom leading the Count's horse and said it looked like Lord Benjamin had just returned. Helena decided she had to act fast before her husband gambled away her dowry, and she quickly thanked Aaron for everything he had done today. She blurted out that she had remembered something urgent and had to leave immediately. Aaron ended by saying he hoped the Countess would see what a good person the Count was, because thanks to him, this guy was able to be here for so long. The girl couldn't believe they were talking about the same person, the guy who had let the castle fall into such a mess. What was so great about a man who couldn't even be bothered to pick up his own damn clothes? Helena just didn't get it. If anything, he should be grateful to his wife for letting him sleep on a real bed next to her. Lady Helena smiled and said she hoped so with all her heart, too. A little later, Benjamin decided to take a bath. He felt exhausted, and not just from sleeping in a bed. The real reason for his lack of sleep was Lady Helena sleeping right next to him. Suddenly, someone shouted Count Ishpein's name. A second later, Benjamin's wild wife burst into the bathroom. The poor guy was stunned and timidly asked her what was wrong. She shamelessly demanded money, then clarified that her husband had to give her back her dowry, as it was her father's and the Empress's money. Helena blurted out that Benjamin hadn't warned her he would leave everything behind, and the guy snapped, "Can't you just shut the damn door?" The girl sarcastically asked if he wanted to talk with the door closed. Benjamin yelled again, louder, for Helena to get out and close the door, but she just laughed. The girl approached her husband and asked why he was so flustered when his whole body was underwater anyway. Then she declared that the money from her dowry was hers to begin with, and that she was in charge of the inheritance. Helena clarified that she didn't need permission, but she had come to give him one last notice. The lady yelled at her husband, "Enjoy your bath," then left the bathroom, slamming the door shut. The next day, Joe introduced the lady to the temporary workers, who were chosen from those not currently assigned to any tasks. The young butler explained to the Countess that he would keep an eye on them and officially hire those who were competent. Then he shouted to the new workers, "It's up to you whether this place can shine again." He told them to do their best to make this castle worthy of the beautiful lady and the honorable Lord Count. Helena smiled to herself, thinking Benjamin would surely fall for that. That evening, she guessed her husband must be sleeping elsewhere, as he had left early in the morning. Thinking of her husband, her mind drifted to the fact that she was always surrounded by shirtless men. If she hadn't seen some of the men in her family shirtless before, she would almost think all men were like that. Still, the main question on her mind was whether Benjamin would show up today. Helena thought what a peaceful evening it was, and even the food made by the cook Joe brought was delicious and unique. So, the recruiter's eye really matters. Unfortunately, Benjamin didn't come for dinner either, so she shouldn't have expected him. It seemed Helena was right to guess he was offended. So our heroine decided to go to the desk, but it was covered in dust, clearly untouched for a long time. But the Count must have some office supplies, right? In a desk drawer, she found a piece of paper. She decided to write a letter to Her Majesty the Empress, but she didn't know where to start. First, she needed to describe the state of the estate. She wanted to check every part of it, but many rooms were locked, and Benjamin must have the keys. It also had to be mentioned that the damage from the fire was much more severe than she had imagined. The letter went like this. Goddaughter Helena Ishpein respectfully greets Her Majesty the Empress and, fulfilling her promise to Your Majesty, has come to inspect the castle and the estate. But 5 years ago, there was a fire at Ishpein Castle, after which the Count dismissed all the servants. Now, this abandoned castle is practically a ghost town. She complained that the Count has apparently decided to let the castle go to ruin, but that's not Helena's problem. You see, she has no desire to live in some gloomy, haunted castle or to revive the family line or anything, but the place should at least be habitable. Helena wrote that, unfortunately, this is all she has learned so far, so this will have to do for now, but it's hardly encouraging. You know, she realized she was being too blunt and that the Empress might be alarmed to see this. She decided to rephrase the part about the castle's condition and provide a few more details about that suspicious fellow. Suddenly, Helena heard angry footsteps approaching. It was Benjamin, stomping around. Helena yelled that he'd scared her to death and asked if no one had ever taught him to knock. The fellow said he didn't need to knock to enter his own room, but Helena retorted that she was here. And yet he just barged in. He replied sarcastically, "Oh, right, because Lady Helena is apparently the only one doing anything in this castle." Then he asked if this was what she meant by doing things her way. Bringing strangers into her husband's castle and turning everything upside down. She was furious. Asking what strangers? She reminded him that he wouldn't let her use the existing servants, so she had brought in some capable people. Then she told her husband to wait and not to tell her he'd sent them away. But Benjamin admitted that he had already sent them away. He even made a point of adding that he'd done it politely, which made her completely lose it. She yelled his full name as Count and declared that he was no longer the only one in charge here. She was also the lady of this county. The girl asked, what's wrong with wanting to make this place livable? Benjamin said that if his wife was so keen on playing the noble, she could go and renovate the annex. He explained that Helena could host her little noble parties there and leave the main castle alone. After that, she sneered and asked her husband if he was hiding something or if he just didn't want anyone to find something. Benjamin approached Helena and asked if she had something to hide herself, but she confidently stated that she had nothing to hide. Benjamin sighed, clearly annoyed, and said he wouldn't expect anything else from someone so simple-minded. Helena suddenly laughed as she was getting closer. Benjamin said that people usually have boundaries, and he wished his wife would respect his. Helena reiterated that she just wanted to make the castle livable, but her husband responded without hesitation. He said he would say it again, life before and after marriage is never the same. An angry Helena pointed at Benjamin and snapped that she could say the same thing to him. She added that, on the whole, he was right, married life does change, especially when it's so destructive. The girl declared that she wouldn't put up with all this and end up miserable. The young man said coldly that it was her problem, not his. The girl added that since it was her problem, she would deal with it herself. She demanded her husband stay away from her and give her the keys. Hearing this, Benjamin indignantly asked what she wanted the keys for. Helena retorted that the castle had countless locked rooms that the Count was callously ignoring. When Benjamin said he didn't know what keys she was talking about, the girl was speechless. Besides, it's not like we have to open those locked rooms. There's already enough space as it is. Helena was furious at her husband's stubborn-as-a-mule behavior. She asked if it had ever occurred to him that there might be something important in those locked rooms. And what's this nonsense about enough space? If everything was fine, we wouldn't be stuck in this one room right now. The girl couldn't understand why this guy was so insistent on keeping the castle in this state. She reminded her husband that a wise man once said you can tell what kind of person someone is by looking at how they live. Helena pointed out that her husband's behavior perfectly match the state of this house. But when a count's estate isn't functioning properly, it's always the common people who suffer the most. The Countess told Benjamin that he had no idea how much effort the people he'd sent away had put into cleaning and repairing this place. Look, she said, I don't know what you're feeling or thinking, but don't take your crap out on everyone in the castle. Helena told him that if Benjamin wanted to keep avoiding her, fine, but she had responsibilities here too. Then, a dejected Benjamin mumbled that the old butler might know where the keys are, since he used to manage everything here. His wife's spirits lifted, wanting to know who this guy was and where he was. But Benjamin just shrugged, saying he didn't know and didn't care. The girl just said she'd figure out herself. Then she fell onto the bed, saying it was getting late, and suggested they call a night. She called him over, and the guy panicked, wondering if his wife really wanted him to lie down next to her. She explained that she'd checked the entire castle, and there was no other decent place to sleep. He said he could sleep in the study like last night. Helena pointed out that place could hardly be called a study, and his bones would surely be screaming. She insisted that he needed to take good care of himself while he was still young. The guy was confused and asked what on earth she was up to. But she didn't answer, instead patting the spot on the bed next to her and telling him to make up his mind quickly. It was then that Benjamin finally understood what his dear wife was up to. Helena slipped her hand under him again, thinking to herself that Benjamin's body was heavy, but warm and solid enough. Unbelievable, but sometimes even a stubborn rock can be useful. Benjamin wondered what was up with Helena today. Her behavior was completely different. Suddenly, the young man felt his wife's hand touch his body. He protested, asking where she thought she was putting her hand. The sleepy girl complained that he had startled her. She called him a blockhead, saying she was just trying to turn over, and thanked him for letting her lean against his back. The guy stammered out, "You're welcome." She kept thinking about the fire, why it happened, and why the Count hated this estate so much, and fell asleep without realizing it. The next day, her attendant Aaron was waiting for his mistress, not understanding why she had ordered the horses to be prepared again. Just as he was wondering where they were going this time, Lady Helena's pleasant voice suddenly rang out. Aaron turned around, and the sight before him nearly made his eyes pop out. Lady Helena explained that they were going to see her former butler and asked if her new look suited her. The trade city of Goha was a key transportation hub connecting the east and west. It was also a lawless land, filled with mercenaries, adventurers, and all sorts of vagrants. Aaron said he understood the lady's desire to find the former butler, Wesley, but he didn't see what that had to do with her outfit. Helena was annoyed. Did this guy really not get it? It's obvious. If you want to cause a ruckus in a dangerous place and survive, a man suit is perfect. Aaron asked if the lady was going to cause a ruckus just to find someone, but she said they weren't going to look for him, but rather make him come to them. From now on, the lady wished to be called Heron. Despite his many questions, Aaron reluctantly agreed. Aaron asked where Heron was going, and she just told him to follow her. She kicked the door open, cheerfully shouted, "Good morning, everyone," and asked if this was the biggest tavern in Go. Immediately, someone yelled, "What the hell?" Which idiot kicked the door open. Then, the tavern owner took a closer look at the guest. The short one was wearing expensive clothes and jewelry, followed by a bodyguard who looked quite wealthy. Instantly, the guy's grumpy tone turned friendly as he greeted the esteemed guests. He asked what brought them to a dump like this, guessing they were looking for some grand adventure. The heroine laughed and asked if he really thought a noble would willingly come to a dump like this. Arena said she was looking for a man named Wesley, with brown eyes, gray hair, tall and well-built. She pointed to the bag of cash, adding that she would reward the people in the tavern handsomely if they could help find him. Aaron quietly asked the lady if this was what she called searching. Weren't they supposed to do it themselves? Meanwhile, the list of men who could be Wesley was getting longer and longer. The lady asked Aaron to repeat what kind of place this was, and he said it was a trading town full of merchants and mercenaries. The girl confirmed that was exactly right. It was teeming with people and a major transportation hub. Moreover, it's not far from Barwood, making this place too conspicuous for someone trying to hide. Lady Arena had been with Sir Kurt, so she spoke as if she knew what she was talking about, and it was clear that Ishpein Castle was once well loved. Aaron asked what the lady meant, but she just told him to wait and see. "This is amazing," she said happily. Then he asked if the lady was planning to leave today, but she didn't answer, instead shoving a spoonful into his mouth and telling him to try it. As the guy chewed, she thought to herself that when a person hears that someone who looks exactly like him is looking for him, he's bound to want to see for himself. You know, hiding in a place like this is basically waiting to be found. So getting the keys won't be hard, but the keys aren't the only problem. Even if the main character tries to convince him, he won't even suspect the change is happening in the castle. The Countess decided to ask Sir Aaron if he knew what happened 5 years ago, but the guy said he knew very little about it and suggested asking the Count directly. The girl replied that she would if she could, but Lord Benjamin was too busy and almost never in the castle. Aaron said that was true, but no matter what kind of person the Count seemed to be in Lady Helena's eyes, she should know that he was a man worthy of admiration. The guy admitted that being a mercenary, which he used to be, was really tough, and Aaron's swordsmanship was far inferior to the Count's. So she asked, is that why he admired the Count so much? Because he owed him his life several times over. Aaron asked if the lady knew of the sea monster set at Arlia, and she said she'd heard of it appearing in the East Sea. The lad mentioned that, yes, in AFL, they used to offer human sacrifices to appease the sea monster. You see, the people who did this thought they were preventing a great disaster. But even with the sacrifices, the sea monster kept attacking the village's fishing boats. More and more. Once the tribute stopped, the sea monster set at Arlia appeared with a huge tsunami. The heroine interjected that she'd heard about that. AFL ended up half submerged and mermaids took over the city. But they did defeat the sea monster in the end, right? Aaron replied that it was the Count himself who killed it in a battle no mortal could have survived. But he's the kind of person who gets what he wants, no matter what. Helena said she knew the mercenary corps of AFL fought against the monster. They held parties in the capital to celebrate. The girl had always thought they won because the warriors joined forces, but Aaron said Benjamin defeated the monster alone. So why wasn't he invited to the capital? I wonder what Benjamin received in return for his feat. Aaron explained that Lady Ophelia gave him a reward, but that was it. After that, the Count took a long vacation and then ran off somewhere. But not long after, Ishpein Castle was burned down, the old Count's entire family perished, and Sir Benjamin became the new Count of Ishpein. Because all sorts of people joined the mercenary corps, they never really care about each other's backgrounds. However, once rumors about the new Count, Benjamin Ishpein, started to spread, Aaron came to the castle himself to see if they were true. He was already in a very bad state at the time. But whenever Aaron recalls that day, he can't figure out why he couldn't even bring himself to ask what had happened. Even 5 years later, there are still many rumors about that tragic event, but Aaron doesn't believe them. He only trusts the Count. Suddenly, the lad stopped the lady, pointing to a tall, gray-haired man, and asked if he could be the one she was looking for. The next second, Aaron and Lady Arena jumped from their seats and rushed towards him, shouting for him to stop. But the guy ignored them and started running himself. And so, a chase for the suspicious fellow began, but the girl and the lad quickly caught up. Aaron grabbed the guy, shouting to see his face. The guy was very angry, asking what on earth they were doing. The guy begged them to let him go, but Helena said she wouldn't hurt him and just needed him to stand still. After a moment, the Countess asked Mr. Wesley if he knew who was standing before him. He replied that he had long known someone from the Count's family would come for him eventually, but he didn't understand who this clueless young master was and where he had come from. What he wanted to know most was why the Ishpein family was looking for someone like him. The heroine got straight to the point, saying that Sir Wesley needed to return to Ishpein Castle. His family needed him. The guy flatly refused, saying he wouldn't go back. Helena asked him what he was doing here then. Wasn't it curiosity that brought Mr. Wesley here? He said if the person who came was truly from the Ishpein family, he would have hidden himself even better. The Countess pointed out that was ironic coming from someone who couldn't even be bothered to change his name. Sir Wesley asked about the young master. Who was he? Was he the Count himself? Was he really from the Ishpein family? Aaron thought, please, don't let her pretend to be the Count. But Lady Helena's answer left him dumbfounded. The girl said she shared a bed with him, but seeing their reaction, she said she needed to add some context. But Mr. Wesley immediately protested, and the guy said in a panic that it was fine. He really didn't want to hear the details. The guy drained his cup and said it all ended 5 years ago anyway, and he wasn't going back. You see, no matter what he wanted, the Count would never forgive Sir Wesley. He said the conversation was over and everyone should leave. Outside the tavern, Lady Helena was angry. Why was that guy so stubborn? Aaron asked Lady Helena if they should just take the keys and go home, as this didn't seem like it would be resolved anytime soon. but the Countess retorted that meeting Sir Wesley had actually made things clearer. He clearly wanted to return to the castle. Aaron double-checked. Even after everything they had just witnessed? The lady said, yes, that's right. Sometimes people deliberately punish themselves, but deep down they want to be forgiven. The lad was very skeptical about this, thinking that if they stayed any longer, he would most likely just ask for money. But our girl was fired up and ready to go. She declared that she would bring Sir Wesley back with those keys. She shouted, I'll be back tomorrow, while secretly racking her brain, trying to figure out what he had done to act this way. Suddenly, Aaron let out a loud sneeze. The Countess jumped, saying he had scared her. The lad pleaded with Lady Helena to find them and in quickly. Aaron said it gets very cold after sunset, and he was starving. The lad suggested that tavern, saying he saw some kind of chicken dish with sauce. Helena regretted bringing him along. The Count of Ishpein returned home. After the cleaning, everything was sparkling, and there were fresh flowers in the vases. The young butler, Joe, greeted Mr. Benjamin, exclaiming how wonderful it was that the master was back. He offered to take and hang up Mr. Benjamin's cloak, but Benjamin refused. Then Joe told him that Lady Helena had left the castle. The Count complained that he didn't need to be informed of her every little thing. She wasn't a child. The young butler said he thought the master should know that she had gone to Goha. The Count's mood shifted instantly, and he demanded to know what on earth she was doing there. The butler explained that the lady was there looking for Mr. Wesley. The Count was horrified, rattling on about how she could go to such a dangerous place. Joe shouted something about dinner, but the Count didn't hear him at all. He was already on his horse and gone. Meanwhile, the heroine and her guard entered Sir Wesley's room, but it was empty. Helena shouted that she knew the guy was going to run. That's why she had come so early, just in case. Aaron asked the landlady where the man who lived here had gone, and she said he had suddenly announced last night that it was time to enjoy life, and took all his belongings with him. Helena was furious, cursing the old man as a lunatic and asking if he couldn't be a little more discreet. Aaron admitted that the landlady had told him the old man went to Lily's, saying he wanted to really let loose. The girl exclaimed that there was still hope. Then Aaron sneezed, and the Countess noticed her guard had been sniffling since yesterday and was now sneezing again. She asked if this guy wasn't a mercenary. How could he be so weak? Aaron replied that even mercenaries catch colds. A few minutes later, our characters were standing in front of an interesting sign, and Helena sneered that it seemed the old geezer had really come here to enjoy life. Aaron asked, is this a brothel? The lady, completely unfazed, said yes and told him to keep up. At the entrance, a beautiful girl greeted them, saying she hadn't seen them before. She asked how the lady had found this place, and Helena said she'd heard an acquaintance of hers was a regular here. Aaron thought to himself that something was off about this place. Meanwhile, the brothel girl boasted that they only had special girls here. She said she was even curious if the young master could satisfy them. The young man whispered to Lady Helena that this place was super weird, and for some reason his eyes wouldn't stop watering. She told him it would stop as soon as he left, so he should stop complaining and go wash his face. She pushed the protesting guy outside and told the brothel girl she was looking for Lily and wanted to meet her alone. The girl was shocked, saying the young master was very brave. As Aaron washed his face, he thought, what the hell is going on? Why does a proud mercenary have to put up with this crap? How did he end up like this? He was supposed to be protecting Lady Helena, but what if the Count found out? Suddenly, someone called out to the young man. It was Lord Benjamin, and he asked where on earth that woman was. To say Aaron was shocked would be an understatement. The furious Count stormed into the brothel looking for his wife, with the madam screaming that he couldn't come in. Meanwhile, Helena's dress had already slipped off her shoulder. The tacky madam yelled that the Lord Count couldn't come in because her girls would be scared. Finally, in one of the rooms, Helena asked Benjamin how on earth he got in. He begged her not to come to places like this again, as she was a married woman. She said she was living out her fantasies, so she was completely out of control. Benjamin yelled that Helena was a joke as a countess, because he hadn't seen her for who she really was, fooled by that angelic face. Suddenly, a soft, fluffy cat's paw touched the Count's face. Helena asked her dear husband how he felt about her fantasy. She pointed to the animal and asked if it wasn't super cute, but the Count just grunted in disgust, saying he was allergic to cats. The next second, a bunch of other furry little creatures appeared around him. Just then, a sniffling Aaron looked at the big sign and realized he didn't have a cold, but a cat allergy. Suddenly, Lily struggled out of Helena's arms, and she cried out in frustration that she had just gotten close to it, only for the Count to scare it away. Benjamin asked what on earth was going on and why there were so many cats. Helena explained that it was a cat cafe. She said it was her first time in a place like this, and Benjamin just sighed in exasperation. Helena huffed and asked what his problem was this time. Benjamin snapped that he had rushed over because he was worried about her. She couldn't believe her husband actually cared about her. He added that she had just arrived in the South and had run off to who knows where. How could he possibly remain calm? The heroine couldn't even comprehend that these words would come from her cold, unfeeling husband. Benjamin said he hadn't slept all night. Helena said he was overreacting. It seems the Count still didn't know his wife. Helena explained that she wasn't the type of person who couldn't tell right from wrong, and she would never do anything reckless. That's why she brought Aaron with her. She admitted she knew the family's character and wouldn't do anything stupid, and neither would Wesley. Benjamin retorted that wasn't the point. He meant he was worried about her. Helena was surprised, as she had always thought he married her for her money. Helena said she was truly sorry for making him worry. He was of course shocked. The girl felt it was better to apologize for the sake of their precarious relationship, but this was just part of her investigation. Suddenly, the Earl reached for his wife's face. She was a little annoyed and asked Benjamin what he was doing, but he told her not to move. The heroine scrunched up her face and shut her eyes tightly, wondering what on earth he was up to. Benjamin plucked a cat hair from her face and said that his wife really loved cats. He then suggested they go home and told her not to be so reckless next time. He added that he wouldn't forget what happened today. Helena replied that she was just in a hurry. She had her reasons. She asked him what he planned to do if he wasn't going to let it go. As they left the cafe, the Earl ran into Sir Wesley, but even that didn't slow Benjamin down one bit. Helena tried to stop him, wanting an answer. The young Earl told Mr. Wesley that he still had no need for the old man, but his wife thought differently. Moreover, the locked rooms were causing chaos in the castle, and Wesley promised to open them as soon as possible. He had already explained to the Countess that he had left on the Earl's orders and would not be coming back. Helena interjected, reminding him that Wesley had said the cats here were all abandoned. She added that a stray cat that grew up being abused on the streets must carry a lot of pain. The heroine pointed out that it was incredible the cat could still let people get so close after everything it had been through. You could see how much heart had been put into it. It must have felt very safe with Mr. Wesley during this time. The more injured a cat is, the more it needs someone by its side. The heroine asked him why he didn't apply the dedication he showed here elsewhere. She pointed out that people are sometimes like injured cats too. The old gentleman argued it wasn't his decision to make, but Helena countered that a knight's virtue isn't just about blindly following orders. The Countess said firmly that Ishpein Castle needed Mr. Wesley. Right now, apparently, her words moved him. He declared that if he went back, he would never leave again, not even if the Earl told him to. Benjamin agreed. Helena gave Mr. Wesley a knowing wink, as if to say, "See, I told you I was right, and it worked." So, yes, the conversation was a success. Helena pestered Benjamin to wait, then barraged him with questions, asking if he came alone and saying he was clearly in a hurry. The heroine was wrapping things up, feeling good about herself because she had succeeded just as she'd expected. Apparently, nothing was impossible for her. Benjamin asked if his wife was in a good mood. She replied that, of course, she was. The Ishpein family was finally starting to recover. The young man smiled and said that was great, that his wife was amazing. Helena asked if he was making fun of her. He said he was just looking forward to what would happen next. In that moment, Helena completely forgot what kind of person Benjamin really was, but she would soon come to regret it. She would scream in terror, questioning what sin she had committed. A few days before the incident, Wesley opened one of the locked rooms. Lady Helena was amazed, as the study was much tidier than she had expected. The butler nodded, and then the lady decided to praise the man, saying the changes were so thorough she was impressed. Wesley said he was even more surprised when he found out that the annoying young master was actually Lady Helena. The Countess said the study was intact, which was a great relief to her. Wesley admitted that the previous Earl had handled all his affairs here. He opened a desk drawer and found a ledger. Lady Helena cried out in delight, as this study held bank accounts, passbooks, business documents, contracts, all the important things. The girl told Wesley she finally understood why he had stayed in Gotha all this time. The old gentleman explained that he couldn't just leave, as the Ishpein family held major shares in many businesses in Gotha. He added that he knew it was a lot, but he had been managing a portion of it for the Earl. Helena said she understood completely. Then she waved the ledger, happily pointing out that everything was different now. Thanks to Wesley, she was thrilled that she could finally get those greedy bastards under control. The butler bowed to the lady, saying the Countess had once again proven how one-of-a-kind she was. Helena asked the butler why he seemed so emotional. He explained that he had realized back in Gotha that the future of the family rested on her. The sun had begun to set, and Lady Helena was still buried in paperwork. This noble family truly had a long and storied history. We found a pile of ledgers and contracts, and Joe also compiled a complete inventory of the castle's property. There was so much to do it felt endless, no matter how hard our girl worked. Suddenly, Benjamin poked his head into the office and asked what this place was. Helena said, "I guess this is your first time here too. This is the castle's main office. It was locked before, but my husband managed to get it open." She boasted that she had found all the ledgers here, so now she was finally going to manage the castle the way it should be. The guy asked curiously, "What are you waving around, my dear?" Helena replied, thinking about how to swat away some annoying things. "You know," Benjamin scoffed and asked her, "Helena, are you really considering it?" She told him to be more specific, and Benjamin, blushing furiously, reminded her that he had gone all the way to Gotha just to find his wife. She said she had already apologized for making him worry, and as for the rest, he was overthinking it. She asked what exactly she should be considering, and he said that, for example, next time Helena could tell him where she was going. Benjamin added that maybe if she did that, he would go with her, but Helena made it clear she was busy and wasn't listening. He said he understood and thanked her for making that decision. After all, since his beloved had put so much effort into this castle, she deserved a role befitting it. She demanded he explain what he meant, but he just smiled smugly and told her not to worry. He would take care of everything. Before leaving the office, Benjamin looked back and told his wife not to expect his help falling asleep tonight. Helena yelled after him that it was a low blow, demanding he stop at once and explain what he was up to. Helena couldn't figure out this Earl. He seemed innocent, but he had a cunning snake hidden in his mind. There was no point wasting energy being angry. Better to get back to work. A little later, the administrator, Joe, called the lady to a room in the castle, begging her not to be frightened because the monsters were terrifying. The lady asked what room this was, and the administrator explained that they had found it while cleaning the first floor. Helena was stunned. There were wooden carvings, and all the figures were painted. The girl guessed it was some strange Ishpein family tradition, and she was annoyed, wondering why anyone would keep something like this in their home. Joe said he was super surprised too, and guessed it might be related to some strange cult or sect that worship monsters. Suddenly, the heroine noticed clothes thrown on the floor and said it looked like someone had been carving all night and then passed out here. Next to the scattered clothes, the girl found a small statue. It said it was a gift from Hodlin to Earl Winston, and the heroine wondered what on earth that little house was doing here. Joe explained that the room wasn't locked. The lock was broken and wouldn't close properly. The Countess declared she had to come back later and check everything thoroughly. Helena guessed this was the Earl's workshop and that there might be clues inside, but whatever Benjamin was up to, it was his own business. She added that they needed to respect his privacy, and, to prevent gossip, she ordered Joe to tell the staff to stay away. The lady said the room was strange, but the main goal on the first floor was the ballroom. Cleaning that chandelier would take a long time, so they'd better hurry. Suddenly, the butler appeared and asked if the lady had invited anyone. Helena replied that she hadn't. Who could she possibly invite? She would never bring guests to this dump. Wesley said the guests had arrived. Countess Bryce, Viscountess Beach, and the leading ladies of Southern high society had all arrived. Even Duchess Muriel Russell was here. The heroine was completely stunned. Just then, she remembered her debutante ball, but for some reason, everyone was talking about her mother leaving the family instead of the little girl. The noble guests were gleefully gossiping about the rumor that Helena's mother, Lady Sandra, had an affair. They also said that bringing a showgirl into the family was their first mistake. The little girl thought that if she cried now, her dad would surely worry about her, and if she told him why, these people would be in trouble, which, honestly, Helena wouldn't mind. At least they wouldn't say such things in front of her again. But the girl didn't want to seem weak or pitiful in front of anyone, so she gathered her courage and curtsied to the guests. She forced a smile and thanked them for visiting Winston Manor today. It was then that Helena learned that even laughter could be a weapon. So back in the present, the arriving ladies were wondering when someone would come out to greet them. Countess Bryce asked if they didn't even have a single servant, and Viscountess Beach replied that after such a long drive, shouldn't they expect better treatment? The Countess pointed out that Duchess Russell had come a long way, and the host couldn't ignore her, or the Ishpein family would be permanently ostracized from Southern high society. Just then, the heroine came out to greet the guests, saying she was honored to meet the noble ladies of the South. The Countess exclaimed excitedly that they were finally meeting the Countess of Ishpein, as she had been reclusive since arriving in the South. She added that everyone was curious about what kind of person the Countess of Ishpein was. Helena sincerely apologized for keeping the ladies waiting and worrying them. She pointed out that, as the ladies could see, Ishpein Manor was not yet ready for guests, so she couldn't properly host them here. Helena admitted there might have been some misunderstanding with the invitations. Countess Bryce was furious, demanding to know if the hostess was saying that Ishpein Manor was rejecting the Duchess and treating her as an uninvited guest. The girl admitted that would be extremely rude, but she genuinely hoped to build a warm and friendly relationship with everyone. She explained that was precisely why she didn't want to, in such an unprepared state, meet people who could become dear friends. Helena snapped her fingers, and the next moment, the butler and the manager appeared. Wesley said that the jealous family's villa was an hour's drive away, and Ishpein Manor had ensured the Duchess could rest comfortably there. Joe mentioned he had also packed some refreshments for the road for them to take. The ladies were stunned that Lady Ishpein was actually sending them away. The Duchess commented that it was indeed impressive, and Lady Helena's composure was admirable. She said they could pretend everything was fine and stay, but the atmosphere wouldn't magically change. The Duchess glanced at the overgrown weeds and cobwebs in the castle, noting that even she didn't have the courage to enter such a place. She added that, for now, she would respect the Countess of Ishpein's reasons. Helena thanked Duchess Russell for her kindness and understanding. The Duchess complained that it was impossible to forget what had happened and said that the Countess of Ishpein surely wouldn't want Barwood to be remembered by the ladies in this way. Helena admitted that of course she didn't. Although she had sent away such distinguished guests today, she would make all the necessary preparations and invite them back soon. The Duchess replied that this was wonderful news, and that she would be spending the next 10 days at Earl Bryce's estate anyway. She asked if that would be enough time, and the heroine replied that she would await the guest's return to Ishpein Manor. Helena promised to ensure the ladies' memories of Barwood would be unforgettable. The Duchess smiled and said she looked forward to their meeting in 10 days. As the last carriage carrying the guests drove away, Wesley commented sadly that Ishpein Manor was finished. Afterward, Lady Helena asked the butler why he said Ishpein Manor was finished. Hadn't he seen how she had turned the situation around? The man explained that rejecting the two central figures of Southern society, Countess Bryce and Duchess Russell, was nothing short of a disaster. The butler pleaded with her to focus, because if they disappointed the Duchess again, there wouldn't be a next time. She replied that they had 10 whole days, and as long as they didn't mess up, everything would be fine. But Wesley said it seemed they had walked into a deep trap. Suddenly, the heroine wondered what was up with that strange invitation, as she didn't remember sending anything. Suddenly, her husband's words flashed through her mind. Since she had put so much effort into this castle, she deserved a role befitting it. She asked to have been writing letters recently, and Wesley said they had been receiving regular letters from Earl Bryce's estate, but the master had recently sent them a reply. The lady shouted in fury. So this is what that bastard meant by a role befitting it. Unbelievable. Benjamin had done this on purpose to make his wife's life more difficult. Wesley kept telling her that at this rate, they wouldn't have time to prepare for the banquet. Helena declared that they could handle it. The castle was a lost cause, but as long as they got the ballroom ready, they could pull it off. After all, the ballroom chandelier was magnificent enough to rival those in the capital. But suddenly, as Helena entered the ballroom, her words caught in her throat. She heard the servants shouting, reminding each other to be careful. The butler rushed forward to see if anyone was hurt. A servant yelled that everyone was okay, but the chandelier was smashed to pieces. Helena clutched her head and wailed, asking what sin she had committed. Then, in a fit of rage, she screamed her husband's name. Just then, Aaron called out to his master and reported that a letter had arrived. Benjamin snatched the letter from his subordinate's hand. He was clearly impatient, devouring every word with his eyes like a hungry wolf. The letter began with "My dearest Benji," and explained that they could never see each other again. The writer said her answer hadn't changed and that she wanted him to forget her and live his own life. The letter also said that he should find his own happiness. It was signed Isabella. Benjamin crumpled the letter in a rage, muttering the writer's name. Isabella had claimed she longed to live in the sun, and little Benjamin had believed it and sincerely worked towards it. But in the end, he had ruined everything. He could still see her face, crying out in pain. Maybe the people who said Benjamin was cursed were right. Suddenly, chaos erupted as monsters appeared out of nowhere. The knights shouted for everyone without armor to retreat. The Earl of Ishpein immediately stepped forward, sharply ordering an immediate retreat. Just as one of the monsters lunged, the letter flashed through Benjamin's mind that Isabella's answer would not change. He couldn't understand why she still refused, and he swung his sword like a complete madman. Isabella had written in the letter that she wanted Benjamin to forget her and live his own life. The problem was, no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't forget her. She wanted him to find his own happiness. But Benjamin didn't understand how he was supposed to do that, and it pained him to know that Isabella was barely holding on right now. Maybe a terrible life is better than no life at all, Benjamin thought. After all, he was dirty, filthy, and ferocious. The guy stared at his reflection in a pool of blood and thought no one would ever want to put up with this monster. As the sun set, Benjamin returned to the manor. His wife, completely horrified, greeted him with a gasp, exclaiming, "Good heavens," and asking what on earth had happened to him. A barrage of questions followed. Was he okay? Was he hurt? Where had he been? What in the world happened? But the guy just replied coldly that his wife had nothing to worry about, and it was none of her business anyway. I mean, it was pretty clear to all of us viewers that this was a real jerk move. Helena frowned, fuming at her rude husband, and said she actually had something to discuss. Benjamin sighed wearily and complained, "Now what is it?" The heroine reminded him that she had spent the day tracking down the former butler just to make the castle a better place, and asked if this was her husband's way of getting back at her. If so, she was so flattered, because thanks to Benjamin's efforts, the whole place was a mess. She was furious. How could you do this to people who worked so hard? The guy asked in surprise, "They really came?" saying he was just joking and that nobles were apparently that shallow. He apologized, but that just made her angrier. He then raised an eyebrow, as if to say, "Isn't that enough?" Helena asked if her dear husband was genuinely clueless or just playing dumb, because this wasn't something an apology could fix. She pointed out that he had tried to mess up her life and ended up making a mess for the entire family, and she didn't like him very much anyway. The heroine was about to tell her husband how he should behave, but he cut her off, saying he got it, and asking if she was done so he could leave. Helena snapped, asking where he was going, especially since the castle was in the other direction. The guy replied that he remembered something important he had to do. Then he turned and gave her a sad look. What the hell? The heroine thought, because whenever he made that face, she felt like the bad guy. Benjamin was walking off in some random direction. Helena yelled after him not to go anywhere, as it was late and the sun was about to set. Then she started to wonder, what is the deal with Benjamin Ishpein? She was still pondering this at lunch the next day. Did he just disappear because she said she didn't like him? He hadn't shown up since, so I guess so, because she was eating alone. Seriously, he picks fights and arguments every day, and then gets all teary-eyed. And now, after all that, Helena had to be the one to chase him down and apologize, even though he started it. She decided she wouldn't waste another second worrying about him, especially since she needed to focus on the banquet. Plus, she had to dig up dirt on that suspicious organization and report back to the Empress. Once the heroine got her title and land, she would dump her husband, and he would regret everything. But they were probably the key to this whole thing. There was only one suspicious place left, Benjamin's workshop. Helena really didn't want to go back, but she needed to search that room thoroughly, so she'd have something to report to the Empress. As the lady was eating, the butler approached and asked if she happened to like pumpkins. The flustered lady replied that she loved them. Wesley said that was wonderful, because it seemed the palace would be serving pumpkin dishes for a while. The lady wondered if the butler had bought a ton of pumpkins from somewhere, or if they had grown them on the estate. Wesley explained that they had bought the pumpkins from the locals. There was a great harvest this year, so pumpkins were overflowing and courtiers were snapping them up for their own manners. The man concluded that the lady would soon be surprised by the versatility of pumpkins. Helena thought to herself that around this time, she would be celebrating a festival that was very fitting for this spooky manor. Suddenly, the heroine had a flash of inspiration. She enthusiastically held out a pumpkin to Wesley, exclaiming happily that she had an idea. And so, 10 days passed, and a carriage carrying the distinguished ladies once again headed for Ishpein Manor. Wow! The Viscountess gushed as she saw the Countess's necklace. Oh, is it the great sapphire everyone's been talking about? The Countess smiled and said, "It seems you have a good eye, my lady." She added, "I simply couldn't wear anything else." Such an unusual invitation practically demands a statement piece. The Viscountess agreed. "That's right, considering they sent everyone home and then re-invited us. It must be something special." The Duchess broke the silence, commenting that Lady Ishpein's skill in buying herself time was indeed impressive. However, the Duchess added doubtfully, "I'm not sure anyone could make this castle presentable in just 10 days. As the invited ladies stepped down from their carriages, children in strange costumes came forward, offering them cookies said to ward off monsters. The ladies were clearly taken aback by their surroundings. The children in strange costumes, the pumpkin lanterns, the spider webs, it all indicated that this was a monster night party. A few seconds later, Countess Ishpein herself confirmed their suspicions, welcoming them to her theme party. She mentioned that she had gone to great lengths to prepare everything, as the tradition dated back to an ancient tribe of sorcerers. They believed that when the sun's power weakened, monsters from underground would crawl out and torment anyone they encountered. So in that era of abundant pumpkins, people used them as lanterns in the dark and dressed up as monsters to confuse the real ones. The problem was, when those monsters actually went extinct, the festival became a bit strange, but the younger generation still loved it. The heroine added that she thought there was no place more suitable for this festival than Ishpein Castle, especially in the south. She said that everything the ladies had seen so far was just the tip of the iceberg and asked them to come in and make themselves at home. The ballroom was also decorated in the same theme, and the invited guests were all excitedly talking about something, so the ball was not only beautiful and fun, but also very lively. In the very center of the hall hung the broken crystal chandelier. Seeing it, Viscountess Beck exclaimed with delight, "Oh my, how gorgeous!" The crowd buzzed, wondering if it had been deliberately broken for tonight's celebration. Countess Ishpein smiled and apologized, explaining that it might all seem staged, but the crystal chandelier's cable had simply snapped. Someone in the crowd shouted that the Countess was so adorable, as many had initially thought it was planned. It was no wonder, as the decorations were so well arranged. Even Viscountess Beth admitted that Countess Ishpein had taken her by surprise. She said she had never seen such an impressive reception, and the hostess expressed her thanks. Then she confessed that she was embarrassed to show the guests this discovery. She said frankly that none of this would have been possible without the help of the people of Barwood. But Countess Bryce was extremely displeased with Countess Ishpein. After all, that wench had even brought in commoners. In the Countess's opinion, this was going too far. But the next second, she smiled smugly, for she had thought of an interesting idea. She said that Countess Ishpein's story had deeply moved her. It sounded like she was in such a rush that she had to resort to commoners. So she said, what normal person would brag about their own crystal chandelier suddenly falling? For a moment, everyone gave the heroine strange looks, and she admitted she hadn't realized it sounded like she was showing off. She added that she wanted to repay the ladies for their kindness at their first meeting and ensure everything was top-notch. The girl explained that she was unfamiliar with Southern customs, so she had to rely on her invited guests. She suddenly grabbed Countess Bryce's hand, saying she hoped the Countess's wisdom would guide her in the future as well. The Countess was completely stunned and couldn't say a word. Then, Lady Helena asked everyone to follow her. She said she had prepared tea and desserts for everyone, an essential part of a Monster Night theme party. The guests followed the hostess, exclaiming in excitement and wondering what other interesting things were to come. Only Countess Bryce lagged behind. Lady Helena approached Duchess Russell, saying she was very happy to see her and that it was a great honor for her. The Duchess said she was equally grateful to Countess Ishpein for arranging this interesting meeting. Lady Bryce pointed out all the trouble it had caused, but Lady Ishpein just smiled and said, "Trouble? Please." She reminded everyone that she had already said how happy she was to be with the people of Barwood. The Duchess said that she should then show her gratitude, adding that she always repays her debts. Then she whispered, "But it's best not to let your guard down. The show isn't over yet, is it?" The heroine was a little confused by the Duchess's advice, just as someone in the crowd asked why the Count of Ishpein hadn't come out to greet them. Then came another question. Have the newlyweds already had a fight? Followed by another. Is the rift between them so deep that they can't be in the same room? It turned out these questions all came from Lady Bryce. Now Helena was certain that this noblewoman was someone to be wary of. Countess Bryce directly asked Countess Ishpein if she had heard the questions and then told her to say where the Count was. Helena was at a loss, as she knew she had asked him to come, and Aaron had also promised to make sure the old fellow wouldn't forget the party. The girl hoped that even if her husband was a complete recluse, he wouldn't neglect the guests. Just then, Duchess Russell came over and told Lady Bryce to be quiet, but Bryce retorted that this was a major emergency. The Countess declared that loveless marriages were a dime a dozen, but a relationship without any trust was a major red flag. Her final point was that the family's honor was at stake. But just as she asked Countess Ishpein if this was correct, the ballroom doors opened. Suddenly, everyone gasped as the master of ceremonies announced the arrival of his lordship, the Count of Ishpein. No one could believe their eyes. The reclusive, unsociable Count had actually appeared at the party. Our heroine was ecstatic, for her husband had finally shown up. Just a short while ago, the Count was shouting for the 100th time that he wasn't going, and Aaron could do nothing with him. "Is that so?" Benji asked. "Is my own assistant going to drag me there?" Aaron reminded him. "Lady Helena said to tell you that if you don't show up today, you don't have to come home." The boss scoffed. "Since when does she get to give orders regarding the Count's castle?" Aaron didn't answer, but said, "She also mentioned that if you don't go, she'll burn the wood in the corner room downstairs." Benji looked confused, thinking, what were we even talking about? Suddenly, he remembered his sculptures. He jumped up in alarm, and his assistant said, "There's no time to waste, sir." But then the boss smirked and said, "I just made those sculptures for fun. What does it matter if they're burned?" Still, he was curious how on earth she had found that room. Aaron explained that Lady Helena was inspecting the castle. He added, "It's not surprising that Lady Helena stumbled upon it, sir." Then the fellow admitted, "I have to say something, but you might not like what I'm about to say." "My lord," the Count told him to shut up, but Aaron took a step forward and asked his master why he didn't try to get along with the lady. Benjamin sneered that the real question was whether there was a single person on earth who could get along with that woman. The fellow countered that he didn't think it was that dramatic, as the young manager and the returning butler had both found common ground with her, and the people of Barwood seemed to obey her completely. The Count asked if this servant was implying that he was the only one with a problem. Aaron said they were all human, and it wasn't strange for a husband and wife to disagree. But what about the vow he made before God? The fellow pointed out that the master should also make some effort to save the marriage and look at the lady's actions from a different perspective. The Count snapped that this was why he was going to this stupid masquerade. Just then, some people working nearby greeted his lordship the Count. He asked if the lady had ordered them to do so, and they replied that they had just finished their work in the fields and decided to come and help. They also said that the lady worked so hard and did so much for the estate that they wanted to help her in any way they could. These words finally made Benjamin start to think seriously about his wife. Helena was one of a kind and noble through and through. A childhood full of love had shaped her, and now she was accompanied everywhere by innocence and unpredictability, and of course, stunning beauty. As the Count opened the gate to the castle courtyard, Aaron's words echoed in his mind. The master has to make some effort, too. Benjamin changed his clothes, telling himself this farce was only temporary, and he just had to get through a few hours. When Benjamin appeared in the ballroom, Helena's eyes lit up, but the young man was truly terrified. The ballroom was buzzing with noise, packed with people, and countless pairs of eyes were focused on him like lasers. The guests began to buzz with excitement and admiration, and Helena took her husband's arm, chattering about how happy she was to see him. The ladies whispered that the couple was a match made in heaven, and that this was probably why they hadn't appeared earlier. They must have been on their honeymoon. Everyone laughed, except for Countess Bryce. She loudly announced that the Count had been away on urgent business, which was why he was late. She added that her husband was probably exhausted from his journey, so they would be leaving the guests for a moment. She whispered to Benjamin to hurry into the room. As soon as they were alone, the Count was about to praise how beautiful his wife looked, but she cut him off. Helena snapped, asking where on earth he had been and why he was only crawling in now. She said she was well aware that he didn't like her, nor did he like anything she wanted to do with the castle. That drove him crazy. Benjamin was stunned and asked when he had ever said he didn't like her. Then she asked if he was trying to say he loved her. Benjamin said, "No way." The girl asked, "Then what is it?" "You don't love me, but you can't say the opposite either." The guy shrugged as if to say, "That's just how it is." The girl replied that she felt the same way about him. She pointed out that it was a good thing they didn't hate each other, so maybe they could actually work together. Helena stated that she wasn't expecting any grand gestures, only that he tried to smile at people occasionally. The guy said he would try. Helena could hardly believe her ears and happily concluded that she could count on his help. After a while, our heroine watched her husband with great interest. Helena even wondered if the guy had taken the wrong medicine while they were apart. Yeah, it wasn't a pretty sight, but at least Benjamin was trying. If he kept this up, it was only a matter of time before he messed up. But Helena really didn't want to clean up his mess, so she decided to take the initiative and help him relax. She called out to her husband, but used a sweet nickname, asking if he wanted to dance before the performance began. Benjamin was completely stunned and asked her to repeat what she had said. Helena replied, "Are you shy?" Then she asked if her dear had forgotten how she had addressed him, telling him with almost no lip movement. The girl pleaded with her husband not to be so dense and to play along, as she was trying to save him. Then Benjamin timidly called his wife dear, and the debutantes who heard it began to gasp and squeal with delight and adoration. Helena was still in shock, because imagining this scenario in her head was one thing, but hearing it with her own ears was something else entirely. She said to her sweetheart that he was bright red and asked if he was feeling all right. Benjamin knew his wife was just being a smart aleck and teasing him, so he pretended it was an accident and gave her a hard push. While dancing, Helena angrily asked what he was doing. Benjamin sarcastically apologized, saying what could she expect from a mercenary? He couldn't dance. Annoyed that he had called her honey, she forced a smile and suggested he go back to his sweetheart. But he admitted that he didn't think their relationship allowed for that. There was too much bitterness and not enough sweetness. He added that, strictly speaking, she wasn't exactly a honeybee either, more like a wasp. This made her so angry that she accidentally stepped on his foot, and Benjamin quietly sucked in a breath in pain. He complained, "What on earth are you doing? I didn't step on your foot." Helena retorted that if he stepped on her with those clumsy boots of his, she'd be crippled. The guy grumbled, "Why were such high heels? As if that changes anything." She asked what he was muttering about. She whispered that she had searched the entire castle to dress him up like a real count, and this was how he treated her. He suddenly pulled his wife close again, telling her not to get too carried away or the audience would see through her act. Helena asked when Benjamin had become such a joker, and he just shrugged, saying it wasn't his fault she fell for it. Later, the heroine admitted to herself that it had been a fun day. She had even managed to relax a little, as if she were back in the city, if only for a brief moment. Helena had completely forgotten about her original mission. Meanwhile, in the office, there was a letter on the desk from Clarissa to someone's little bird. After the ball, the heroine returned to her office, thinking she could finally catch her breath. Helena was glad that Lady Bryce hadn't pulled any more tricks, and even Benjamin had behaved himself. Now, the girl could safely entrust the task of receiving the male guest to Benjamin, and all that was left was to check the guest list, and then fall asleep with a smile. The heroine remembered the days when she couldn't even imagine such a low-key ball existed. In comparison, the reception for Her Majesty the Empress that Helena had the honor of organizing was ridiculously extravagant. That tea party was simply unparalleled. She wondered if there would ever be a day when she and the Empress could have a leisurely cup of tea like they used to. It seems they were right. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Huh? The girl picked up the letter and gasped when she saw the handwriting. It was a letter from Her Majesty the Empress. The heroine woke up in a cold sweat. It had been another nightmare. Suddenly, Helena felt even worse. She made a mental note that she felt really strange today, as if her whole body was limp. She lifted the covers to look, saw the blood stain, sighed sadly, and called for her maid. The maid took the soiled sheets and wished the lady a good rest. Helena couldn't figure out why her period had come a whole week early, but at least it was after the ball and not before. So that was why she had been so emotional when reading the letter. She had been putting off replying because she hadn't found out anything about Benjamin's workshop yet, so she had nothing to report. Helena thought she would deal with it thoroughly when she felt better, but for now, she just wanted to relax and think about nothing. And just like that, her plans to relax and rest were ruined because Benjamin burst into the bedroom, asking what was wrong with her. Helena played dumb, and her husband explained that he had seen the maid with a blanket covered in blood. Helena feigned surprise, asking what the big deal was, and told him to tell her how the guests were. He said everyone had gotten home safely, then told his wife to tell him where it hurt. Helena asked if he hadn't figured it out yet, and Benjamin looked blank, as if asking himself if he had missed something. She fell back onto the bed, pulled the blanket over herself, and grumbled that it was her time of the month, basically her period. As the Count left his wife's room, he ran into the butler, who wished him a good morning. Benjamin couldn't think of anything else to do but ask Wesley what this period sickness was all about. Meanwhile, Helena tossed and turned, unable to sleep, feeling exhausted. She had been working too hard lately. If it weren't for Benjamin Ishpein, she wouldn't be in this situation. Speak of the devil. Her husband was asking how Helena was and if she was feeling any better. She said no, then asked why he was still hanging around the castle when he had things to do today. The husband asked what he could do for his dear wife, as Wesley had told him everything. Helena turned away angrily, saying no, there was nothing he could do about her period, and there was no doctor on the estate anyway. Benjamin said he could call for a doctor, but she told him to forget it. She wasn't about to let some strange man examine her body. Although she said she would be fine after a few days of rest, Benjamin appeared in the bedroom a little later with a tray of food. Helena rolled her eyes and asked in disgust, "What the hell is this?" He said his wife needed to replenish the blood she had lost. Helena scoffed. Replenish it with what? Food. How did you even come up with that idea? She noted with disgust that it was fish soup. Of all things, fish soup, which Helena had never touched before and wasn't about to start now. Benjamin asked if she could at least try a little, and Helena thought, my God, this isn't a husband, it's a punishment. Helena yelled that she didn't want it. What was with this stubborn bastard of a husband? But Benjamin kept insisting, saying he knew she was in pain, but she needed to eat something and get her strength back. She sighed. She irritably grabbed a sandwich just to get her husband to stop bothering her. As Helena chewed, she thought about how tired she was and how, on top of everything else, she had to waste her energy on this eccentric husband. The girl wanted to get rid of him and, after swallowing, asked if that was enough now. She told him to leave, and the Count wiped a crumb from the corner of her mouth. He praised her, wished her a good rest, and said he wouldn't bother her anymore. He would go and have someone send some hot tea for the lady. As Benjamin left, the heroine thought, does this guy really think I'll forgive him just because he's handsome? As soon as Helena felt a little better, she headed straight for her husband's workshop. There she would find the key to his secret. A smile played on her face as she fully imagined herself with a title, an estate, and her own land. The problem was, her thoughts were a jumbled mess. The girl realized she was truly exhausted. The Countess called Helena a poor child for having to go through so much pain every month. Her father made his precious daughter drink medicine. The man promised that they would have dinner together as soon as she felt better. He would have the chef make Helena's favorite dish. The heroine was completely lost. Was she at home? Henry wished his sister a speedy recovery, and Iara said they were very worried. Tears welled up in the heroine's eyes, and she began to sob. She was so homesick. Suddenly, Benjamin emerged from the shadows. Helena called his name, asking how he could be here, but he didn't react. He just silently ran a finger across her mouth, as if wiping away a crumb. Out of nowhere, Her Majesty the Empress appeared, saying that Helena was such a disappointment. She seemed to be saying, did this girl really think she could go back on her promise to the Empress herself? Her Majesty, still cold, told Helena that perhaps she needed a small cup of tea. Our heroine stared at the cup as if it were about to bite her, and the Empress snapped, "What are you waiting for? Drink it." Suddenly, the girl felt a chill, and her hands began to tremble, no longer able to hold the cup. Her body froze like a block of ice. She was frozen, unable to move, begging her loved ones in her mind. Well, our heroine was tossing and turning in bed, covered in tears and sweat, begging them to stay, not to disappear. She couldn't lose them. Meanwhile, Benjamin was hurrying to his wife's room with a tray of food. She had been looking so haggard lately. He told himself that from now on, he needed to pay closer attention to when and what she ate. On the way, the Count ran into the young manager, who greeted him cheerfully. Benjamin asked Joe what the stack of documents in his hands was. He explained that the lady had asked him to prepare them. They were mostly expense reports from the last reception and employee payrolls. There were also land tax documents. The Count said he would handle them himself, as the lady was not feeling well today. The manager offered to call a doctor for the lady. Benjamin remembered his wife's words that she wasn't about to let some strange man paw at her, and ordered Joe to find a female doctor. Then he glanced at the documents, marveling at how such a delicate girl had managed everything on her own. And she had to take care of the ball preparations on top of that. No wonder she had collapsed from exhaustion. The guy mentally cursed himself for acting like a complete child. But suddenly, his face twisted in fear as Helena was tossing and turning in bed, groaning in pain. Benjamin dropped his stack of documents and rushed to her side. When the heroine woke up, there was a cold towel on her forehead, and she realized it was evening. It seemed she had been unconscious for some time. She found her husband lying beside her and realized she couldn't even lift her arm. Benjamin told her to sleep a little longer as it was late, but she asked what time it was. He said it was 10 o'clock. She had fallen asleep after breakfast, tossed and turned all day, and then started sweating profusely. Benjamin said she eventually passed out. She gasped sadly, remembering all the things she had planned for the day. Benjamin set a stack of documents aside, commenting on the incredible amount of effort and attention the castle required. Even after all she had done, at this rate, she would completely run her body into the ground, especially with the way she was eating. She didn't like his words and snapped back that none of this would have happened if he had just lifted a finger. Benjamin said that was exactly why he was suggesting they share the tasks from now on, especially the urgent ones. He added that he was terrified when he saw Helena unconscious. She was shocked that he was so worried about her, but the next second, Helena snapped that it was all his fault because he never usually pushed himself so hard. Helena fumed that Benjamin had no idea how sleep-deprived she was because of that reception. Besides, she was bound to have nightmares if she didn't hold someone's hand, and he had promised to take care of her. But he broke his promise. In a gentle voice, Benjamin begged for his wife's forgiveness and promised that from now on he would always be by her side. The heroine wondered if this was really the Benjamin she knew. She couldn't understand why he was being like this, doing things he originally never wanted to do. The heroine let out a big yawn. She had finally gotten a good night's sleep, and now Helena felt fantastic. It's true what they say. The morning sets the tone for the day. On one hand, thanks to Benjamin, she no longer had nightmares. On the other hand, she was also exhausted because of him and had to clean up the mess he left behind from the ball he threw. Everything hit her all at once. The reception, her period, but even so, she couldn't remember ever feeling this awful before. Suddenly, Benjamin appeared in the bedroom and asked if Helena was awake and how she was feeling. The girl replied that she felt much better today. Then, her loving husband presented a flower, declaring, "A rose for rose due, just as you asked." He added that he had searched for it especially for Helena, as there were no roses in the Ishpein National Garden. Helena flew into a rage. It was a poisonous flower. She yelled that her husband did it on purpose. But he asked in confusion, "What do you mean? Isn't this a rose?" Helena was indignant, and he replied, "Well, the flower is red." The girl asked if, in her husband's eyes, all red flowers were roses. Benjamin asked curiously, "Aren't they?" The girl was fuming internally. What was with this guy? He couldn't even tell a rose from poison ivy. So, the best thing to do was to get away as soon as possible. A long time ago, mages known as the Arcane ruled the world, and they used magic to build an empire the likes of which had never been seen. But the overuse of magic broke the barrier between the surface and the underworld, and demons poured out from that rift. It was then that heroes, sent by the High God, appeared, defeated the monsters, and sealed the portal to the underworld. The arcane mages who had made the grave mistake were exiled from the fertile lands, and the age of magic came to an end, leaving only the monster Forest Karama. It separated the Malaria continent into northern and southern parts. That was all the heroine knew about the legends of the age of magic. Since then, any evil magical creature was called a demon, and even if it was just a legend, a room full of those things was still creepy. But Helena needed to find a clue. She had no other choice. The capital was heavily guarded, and she had never seen a monster before. But since coming here, she felt like she had seen them all. Benjamin suddenly appeared and asked what Helena was doing there, and if she was looking for her husband. She stammered that it was something like that. She couldn't very well tell her husband she was gathering evidence to send him to hell, but she didn't have the guts to snoop around this gloomy room alone. Helena just said she was curious about what was inside. The guy listened to her, then suddenly pushed her against the wall. The girl was startled and could only manage to whisper for him to stop. Okay, maybe they were a little close at the reception, but not this close, right? Suddenly, Benjamin handed his wife a small dinosaur figurine and told her to take a look. He explained that he had made it recently, carved from a wyvern's horn, using a technique he learned from a taxidermist. Covering the skeleton with hide, Benjamin thought the finished product was quite realistic. Helena said sarcastically, "Yeah, so realistic, just like a real monster." Benjamin reached for the next figurine. He said his wife might like this one too, since there are pixies in the monster forest, although they are dangerous in real life. He said they look kind of cute, but Helena muttered, "Cute? How are they cute?" The guy, not sensing her displeasure, suggested that adding lace might make them look better, like they had wings. Helena said sarcastically, "Oh, what a brilliant idea," and he took it completely at face value, adding, "I got the idea from seeing you, honey." He told his wife to take her time and just ask if she saw anything she liked. She wondered what was wrong with him, why he was trying so hard. It seemed he was completely absorbed in his hobby. She figured there was no harm in just looking. Then her eyes fell on something interesting. Wait, was it a statue of a woman? Benjamin snatched the statue from Helena's hand, and she asked, "Is that your first love?" He exclaimed, "No way, Zrinya." But she retorted, "Really? Then why hide it? Something's fishy." She was like, "I get it. This is just a political marriage, so who cares, right?" Benjamin protested, but Helena countered, "As your wife, I should know your tastes, dear." And he said, "That's exactly why I'm saying you're wrong." He took a breath and handed the statue to his wife, telling her to take a closer look. But it didn't help. Helena just had more questions. Then he snatched the statue back again, telling her to stop looking. "My lady, you're already staring a hole through it." The guy said it was time to go back, but she became very indignant. "Did you put out of my reach on purpose? That's so petty." The heroine asked, "Why are you keeping secrets from me, huh?" She pointed out that it was suspicious, but he insisted there was nothing suspicious. It was just a normal piece of wood. Then the guy asked, "So, is it pumpkin again for dinner tonight?" He suggested they have dinner together, adding that it was getting dark and they had to get ready. The heroine wondered if she had really seen the inscription on the bottom of the statue clearly. I mean, that ancient language was used by the mages known as the arcane, and that script was forbidden by the Empire. The next day, a brand new lock appeared on the workshop door, and Lady Helena wondered what on earth was going on. She asked if it was really necessary to get a new lock, and the young butler Joe explained that the door had been repaired and locked last night. The lady asked where the key was, and the butler explained that the Count said he would keep it himself. He took the key, and only one was made. The lady smirked to herself, wondering if her husband was finally starting to make a move. A little while later, the heroine appeared at the training grounds, demanding the key from Benjamin. He wondered if the lady wasn't tired of looking for the key yet, and she replied that a new lock had just appeared on the door. Helena said it was her husband's workshop, and he was the only one with the key. Benjamin pointed out that it was a private space. He said it would be a problem if his wife tried to sneak in again, so if he were her, he would have changed the lock too. The guy wondered why his wife was so obsessed with getting into that room if she didn't even like the carvings. She panicked, unable to think of an answer for a moment. Her husband turned around and told her to go back. He had too much to do. The Count turned and saw the knights eavesdropping. It seemed a private space was indeed necessary. Helena wondered what was wrong with her husband now. Yesterday, he was all smiles, chattering on about everything even when no one asked. It seemed he was sulking because his wife had hit a nerve. She said that if he was trying that hard to hide the woman's statue, well, she would respect his past memories, and then ran off crying. The knights surrounded the Count, pressing him. "What past memories are we talking about? Is it about an ex?" The Count snapped that it wasn't like that at all, but it was no use. The knights were still calling him a pervert and a playboy behind his back. The Count declared that if anyone said another word, the knights would regret it because it wasn't what they thought. "It seems Benjamin has let you all have it too easy." He announced that the squad was heading to the village on the edge of Hotha immediately. It had been too long since the last clearing. The knights were stunned by the sudden order, and Aaron asked if the lady was jealous. The Count just smiled and said she would never be. The guy pointed out that his gut told him that was exactly the case. The Lord snapped back that if Aaron spouted any more nonsense, he'd have to go with the others. The guy asked, so was he staying behind? He'd be happy to take care of the beautiful lady of the castle. The Lord Count pointed out that guarding the lady was more than just standing watch. because she was the kind of woman you never knew what she would do. So a little while later, the heroine stood before the workshop door with a sledgehammer in her hands, grinning. She declared that it was time to let off some steam. The heroine prepared to swing the hammer, shouting that she was going to make Benjamin Ishpein pay. Suddenly, someone called out to the lady. It was Aaron. Lady Helena asked why he was here instead of on the expedition, and if Benjamin had left him behind to spy on her. Aaron suggested they put this aside for a moment and talk calmly. The Countess flew into a rage, saying he was a scoundrel and was planning to hold her hostage. She ordered him to give her back the damn sledgehammer immediately, but Aaron just begged her to calm down, saying he would explain everything. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the statue was like a good luck charm to the Count. Lady Helena said, "What on earth does that mean?" Aaron explained that the look on the Count's face when he looked at the statue was not one of love at all. It was more like the way Aaron felt when he looked at his sisters, and he had known the Count for over 10 years. And even if it was the Count's first love, he hadn't even touched the shadow of that woman in all that time. She cut him off, demanding to know if he was saying she was jealous. Aaron asked if it was true, and she yelled that it wasn't. The guy pointed out that she looked even more jealous when she was that angry. He interjected that he was glad, because it was proof of just how close the Count and Countess were. As a married couple, Lady Helena just screamed that it wasn't true, loud enough to wake the whole damn castle. Back in her study, the heroine thought, "Oh no, now everyone really thinks she's jealous." Seriously, she just wanted to know if the statue was really of an ancient woman because she needed evidence for her letter to Her Majesty the Queen. But the more Ben hid it, the more suspicious it seemed. The ancient language used by the arcane mages for magic was supposed to be completely forbidden. I mean, owning a statue with ancient writing on it isn't a crime, but the real question is who this dangerous group really is. The arcane are the cursed race that brought monsters into this world. It said their eyes glow red in the dark, and they have always lived in hiding and been reduced to the lowest class of slaves. Benjamin does have red eyes, but they don't glow. And Benjamin is definitely the legitimate heir of the Ishpein family, but maybe he has some connection to the arcane. Helena was stumped. Given the history, the kingdom certainly has a clear stance on this. But this discrimination based on appearance had always made her uncomfortable. The people who really needed to pay for the crime had disappeared centuries ago. Besides, who's to say it was definitely the ancient language? Helena barely knew any ancient script. It could have just been some scribbles. Acting rashly in an information war like this could be fatal. She needed to get solid intelligence first before she could present it to the Empress. The heroine concluded that, given how things were going, she had to rethink her entire plan. So when evening came, Helena greeted Benjamin with warmth and sincerity. She told him he looked wonderful today and asked if the clearing operation went well. Naturally, the young man was confused. Helena asked what was so strange about a wife greeting her husband. She calculated that if she continued this conversation, she might get closer to him, and maybe another important clue would surface. The Count said he did the same thing every day, patrolling the territory and catching monsters, nothing too strenuous. Seriously, that's still amazing, his wife said enthusiastically. After all, you're the strongest swordsman in the Empire. Benjamin blushed and muttered, "I'm not that great." Helena thought, "Good reaction, gotta keep it up." She went on to exclaim, "Oh my goodness, dear, your hands are a complete mess. Full of cracks," she chattered. "It'll sting like crazy if these hands get wet." Benjamin just shrugged. "I don't mind. You can't let such pretty hands get into such a terrible state." She insisted. "Now come on," she told him. "Come with me right now." Helena explained, "I brought hand cream and some nice essential oils with me when I came to the castle. Just put some of this on, and I promise they'll feel a million times better. In the capital, there are salons for hand care, and I went to one with Her Majesty the Queen once. They massage your hands with warm water and then apply all sorts of essential oils. It's really relaxing. Oh, by the way, that salon does amazing nail art. They even matched Helena's nails to her eye color. It was this green and gold design. She was shocked by how much she liked it. She was practically gushing about how exquisite Her Majesty's jewelry was. But Benjamin started to feel like he couldn't breathe. Helena dramatically announced that it was all done and asked her husband how he felt. His hands smelled of a lovely chamomile scent, and he muttered that it wasn't bad. Suddenly, Helena remembered that next weekend she had a meeting with the company managers related to the Count of Ishpein's estate. She asked if her husband would come, but he hesitated, muttering something to himself. She thought she should have flattered him more before inviting him. But then Benjamin surprised her by saying he would go. The heroine jumped up from the bed in excitement, asking if her husband was serious. He said, yes, he would try to make time. Helena thought, no way, this is amazing. She had thought her husband would act as if anything related to the Count's estate had nothing to do with him. Benjamin pointed out that it was late and told his wife to get to bed. From that day on, the young man would make sure to come home no matter how late. Benjamin impatiently asked again if his wife was coming over. Helena was overjoyed, muttering that she was coming right away. After his wife got into bed, he wished her sweet dreams. The girl couldn't believe her luck. Her cold and distant husband had just fallen asleep right beside her. Once you get to know Benjamin, he's actually quite straightforward. But the day Helena could be honest with him would never come, because she had to keep her promise to Her Majesty the Queen. On the important day, the heroine went over her checklist, maps, plans, and even some backup information just in case. Helena was a nervous wreck, but she felt prepared, so everything should go smoothly. She asked Wesley if everyone was in the hall, and he said, yes, all the invitees had arrived, and even the Count was waiting outside the dining room. The girl couldn't believe it, because it meant Benjamin was really going to make this partnership happen. Wesley double-checked the prepared documents, and then wished Lady Helena good luck. He said he hoped everything would go well and end without any trouble. The girl declared that there was nothing to worry about for the Ishpein estate, because with her here, she would surely win today. Meanwhile, the merchants were chatting, trying to figure out why they had all been suddenly summoned together. The Chamber of Commerce president, Beryl, said that if it was the same old nonsense, he wasn't playing along. He explained that the Ishpein estate had unilaterally cut off investments with their chamber and had given no explanation for the past 5 years. If the deal fell through completely, wasn't it because the Count himself had messed it up? Beryl interjected that this new Count was a real arrogant show-off, just like McKinney's kid. The builder, McKinney, told Beryl to watch his mouth, saying he understood how the guy felt, but the Count was still the Lord of Barwood. Chamber President Duval said McKinney was right, because the relationship between merchants and the Lord is mutually beneficial, and if the Count decides to start over, then the merchants must support him. Beryl wondered if the arrival of one person could really change anything after the last 5 years. He added that he was going to have Chinyu formally withdraw from the deal. Just then, the Countess walked in and thanked everyone for coming. Despite this, the crowd responded that it was their honor to be invited by the Count and Countess. Helena smiled and asked everyone to be seated and suggested they first discuss why everyone was gathered here. The Countess explained that she wanted to first apologize for the estate's past mistakes. She also expressed her apologies and thanked everyone for continuing to work for the benefit of the estate despite their losses. McKinney said the lady had nothing to apologize for, as the estate probably had its own difficulties. And after all, business isn't always smooth sailing. The Countess thanked him for his words, as it eased her mind a little, but Beryl was negative. He stated that he wanted to clarify a few things before getting to the main point, and reminded them how the estate had rejected everyone the merchants sent a few years ago. The man demanded an explanation for why they had suddenly changed their minds, and Helena asked her husband in horror if it was true that the people the merchants sent were driven away. Benjamin looked away, muttering that he didn't want to see them in the first place. Helena whispered that he had made this situation himself and now had to apologize for it. Beryl continued that it had been decided back then the relationship between their chamber and the Count's estate was permanently severed. He spoke emotionally about how the merchants barely managed to stay afloat on their own after losing their investors. Lady Helena tried to stop him, but Mr. Beryl was not about to shut up. He pointed out that, furthermore, the transfer of the Count's title on their side was also sudden, and they weren't even informed of the process. Well, if the Count intends to work with us, he has to give us a damn good reason to trust him. First of all, Benjamin claimed he only became the Count because he was next in line, not because he wanted to be here, nor because the kingdom asked him to. Beryl pointed out that the Count hadn't changed a bit, still not admitting to any fault. Am I right? Benjamin stood up and asked the hothead if he was also the same coward who couldn't look him straight in the eye. He declared that if everyone had such a hard time trusting the new Count, then they could very well trust his wife, Helena Ishpein. Duval suddenly interjected, telling the Count that the merchants were doing just fine without the estate these days. But if the Lord Count really wanted to build a new partnership, then the estate needed to show some sincerity as well. The Countess, beaming, said that she had of course come prepared, and that she had an offer they couldn't refuse. She added that she planned to establish a central hub city in Barwood. Duval asked if the lady meant to build a city on the scale of Tiras in Ely-Ron or Klaus in the Duchy of Guelph. He pointed out that Tiras has the advantage of being close to the capital, but Klaus has a rare portal that doesn't exist elsewhere. The guy was curious. Since Barwood has nothing like that, how did the lady plan to establish a center there? Helena said that even without a portal, isn't there the Munker trade route? The men asked if the lady was talking about the Lucca crossroads that connects the east and west of the southern region. Helena said she was referring to Goha and pointed out that in reality, only a limited number of people can use the portal. So developing a city that bypasses the portal could be more advantageous, and it could become the largest city in the south. Helena said that was exactly what she meant, and that together they would build Goha into the central city of Barwood, and eventually make it the largest metropolis in the southern region. That night, Helena chatted with her husband, pointing out that as expected of merchants, they get fired up at the mention of money. But at least the ones who stayed have some conscience, so there shouldn't be too many obstacles. Benjamin felt that his wife's support would solve everything, and then asked her how she came up with the idea of developing Goha. She explained that her last trip to Goha to find Wesley had made up her mind. I mean, if we fix the infrastructure and security, Goha has real potential for growth. Helena added that the Ishpein estate has the strength to handle security, and a solid business plan would be able to attract investment from the nobles of Barwood. Benjamin asked what else he could do to help, saying he would do whatever she needed. Helena said she wanted to talk about getting some investment from the nobles later. Then she asked about that guy named Beryl. What was the deal, and why Benjamin was so tense? It's not like he hadn't met merchants before. Benjamin admitted that when he inherited the title, those merchants were the first to reach out to him, so he had met them a few times. She asked him why he had ignored them for the 5 years that followed, and he stammered that he hadn't looked at the documents carefully. She retorted, asking what that was supposed to mean, and he explained that the documents were difficult to understand and that he had messed up. But in any case, Ben realized the business world wasn't for him. Helena flared up at this, asking how he could say such a thing and that he should have asked more questions and learned more. She reminded her husband that he had people around him who could help, and what kind of lord was he if he couldn't even handle something like this? Ben admitted he could tell they were very unhappy with him. Helena asked him to be clear. Were they just unhappy and not afraid of him like they used to be? The young man said that you could tell from their eyes. He told her that he had once overheard members of the council talking, and they said that when the count looked at you, it sent a chill down your spine. The young man suddenly said he was going to rest because he had to get up early the next day and wished the lady a good rest as well, telling her not to overwork herself. The heroine wondered to herself what was wrong with her husband. He had barely touched the food on his plate. The lady asked Wesley if he understood what was happening, because from the very beginning, when they first talked about meeting with the merchants, he had been very worried. The butler said hesitantly that everyone who lived in the South knew that encountering monsters was not a rare occurrence. Perhaps that was why people's fear of creatures like monsters and their hatred for their existence were so strong. So for the people of the South, the arcane, being the source of the monster's existence, became an object of hatred and contempt. Helena asked what this had to do with Benjamin, as he was born with red eyes, unlike the arcane whose eyes changed later. Wesley pointed out that the Count was not actually an arcane, but a single symbol on him was enough to make people feel fear. And that was the cruel truth. And so, the Count and Countess discussed plans to fortify and improve the city with the construction workers. The construction foreman said they needed a fortress wall, as the monsters would be more active in the winter, so it would be best to complete it before then. Then he pointed to the map and mentioned that while this area wasn't the center, the shops were quite good, and it would be great if they could be repaired first. The heroine agreed, stating that she would definitely consider their opinions regarding the order of repairs for the capital and the roads. She said they had already raised enough funds for the repairs through the merchants, so everything would proceed quickly. She was really looking forward to what Goha would look like in the future. Afterwards, the Count and Countess decided to have something to eat. Wesley placed some caramels on the table and said, "You have both worked hard." Lady Helena chimed in, saying the butler was a real star for even thinking of this. The The butler just said she was too kind. Benjamin scoffed, saying he didn't need any, and told Wesley to hurry up and make the meal. His wife stuffed a caramel into his mouth, telling him not to be like that and to at least try one. She asked her husband if it was delicious, and he agreed that it was. Then Lady Helena asked Wesley if the earldom had the financial means to spend money on desserts. She added that they bought them quite frequently. Wesley asked if she really didn't know that the South has vast sugarcane plantations, so the earldom has no issue with sugar, which is also why there are so many dessert shops. The butler revealed that the Count's family also seemed to have its own sugarcane plantation. Lady Helena's spirits lifted, and she excitedly asked if he was serious. Wesley mentioned that, for some reason, that plantation was not currently in operation. The heroine wondered to herself why sugar production was so scarce in the North. Helena thought this could definitely make a fortune, and she decided to deal with the details later. The butler bowed and excused himself, saying he was going to prepare the food. Benjamin suddenly asked. The guy asked his wife if she had come up with a way to win the noble's support, and she chirped excitedly that she had it all figured out. She handed him a box, telling him to start with this. Benjamin asked if they were glasses, pointing out that he already had a pair, but she complained that his glasses weren't stylish at all. She lunged at him, demanding he put them on immediately, while he yelled at her to stop. When Benjamin finally put on the glasses, she gushed about how good he looked in them. She pointed out that even his gaze looked softer and demanded that he wear this pair to the nobles gathering that night. Helena also made him wear an outfit she had chosen. When dealing with nobles, first impressions are everything. She explained that he needed to look both respectable and impressive, not to beg, but to show confidence and declare that only those who are willing can follow him. Even the most cautious people wouldn't want to be left behind. They would take action because nobles cannot stand being marginalized. Benjamin asked his wife where she learned all these things, and she said it was all about constantly planning and putting ideas into action. She added that she would love to take all the credit, but in reality, she learned a lot just by being around Her Majesty the Empress. Speaking of which, Empress Clarissa Arpin is a remarkable strategist, isn't she? Helena then asked her husband if he had ever seen her in person. The young man admitted he had, but it was a long time ago during the Battle of Arlia. The girl asked if he meant the time they defeated the sea monster, pointing out that Aaron had said it was the Count who saved Arlia from destruction. Benjamin said he was only a vice commander at the time and had only briefly led the squad at a critical moment. It was then that Her Majesty the Empress ordered him to formally attend court to commend the young man for his service. The girl was curious how exactly she had thanked him, and Benjamin replied dryly that it was the old-fashioned way, with money. She scoffed, saying it couldn't have been just that, especially for a meeting arranged by the Empress herself. But the guy stated bluntly that the reward had been good enough. The heroine noticed her husband had become very dejected and asked if he was all right, but he snapped that he was fine, just remembering some bad memories. Helena asked if something had happened between him and the Empress, but Benjamin didn't want to reveal anything, saying only that it was nothing. Benjamin felt the warmth of his wife's hands. Then she said that even if their marriage had a rocky start, they were still husband and wife, and spouses should support each other. Helena said that now her husband was supporting her, so she would be his support in return. She told him to remember that, and those words indeed made Benjamin fall into deep thought. To become someone who could make another person stronger. Could this fake marriage really turn into something like that? Benjamin thought to himself that even if he told Helena everything, he doubted she would be able to understand or accept him. That very evening, a reception was held at the Glass Mansion for the Southern nobles, and everyone was saying how wonderful it would be if Go had a salon or a tea room. A socialite chirped that she wanted a comfortable and pleasant shopping experience like in the big cities of the North. A nobleman asked the Count what made him notice Goha, adding that he had been there many times but had never had this thought. Benjamin pointed out that it was indeed a remote and desolate town, but Gohan had an advantage that money couldn't buy: the Luca Road. He happily announced that once the administrative building and the city walls were completed, it would become a truly perfect city. The Count said that if anyone wanted to participate in this project with the Count's estate, they had better hurry, as they didn't need many people. Naturally, not only were the guests surprised by such a confident statement, but so was Helena. So she added that, therefore, the Ishpein earldom would soon host a charity bazaar to raise funds for the construction. But this bazaar would not be an ordinary one. The Ishpein earldom would prepare a special night, not just a bazaar. The guests were intrigued and asked what special night she was referring to. Lady Ishpein clarified that everything would be legal, amazing, and provocative. It turned out the heroine was planning a masquerade ball. Suddenly, the Count needed to talk to his wife. Immediately, he grabbed her dress, telling her to stop so they could talk properly. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's turn back time to 7 days ago, when our heroine was brewing her grand plan. When she saw the guest list of those who would be attending, her eyes widened. If she had known earlier, she would have started cleaning the small hall sooner, as the charity bazaar was to be held in the small hall and the masquerade ball in the grand ballroom. But just as Helena thought she was almost finished, she turned around to see a group of servants gathered around her. She asked what on earth was going on. The servants said that she had been cleaning, but the Count had driven everyone away and boarded up the door. While Helena was seething with anger, Benjamin was taking a walk in the castle's backyard. He wondered to himself, when on earth did this garden become so beautiful? He went closer and saw that the doors and windows were boarded up. Just as he expected, there was no way he could let Helena see that room. The heroine, furious, rushed to the garden, ready to confront her husband. She screamed his name, asking if he was messing with her and why he had locked up the small hall. Benjamin calmly pointed out that the room was the most damaged in the fire. It was unusable now. The girl's anger did not subside, as she roared that if that was the case, then there wasn't a single decent space in the entire castle. And she had already called for the artisans, so what was she supposed to do now? Benjamin replied that the main hall could be used, as they had already fixed the chandelier. Helena pointed out that there would be 5 times more guests this time than the last, and it would still be crowded even if both halls were open. His decision was final. He declared that the room was off limits, no matter what. Then he asked his wife not to be angry with him and to find another solution. Helena was furious, saying her husband was being unreasonable. He had understood and agreed to cooperate, so why the sudden change of heart? If he had a problem with the organizer, he should just say so. It's obvious he just doesn't like me. Benjamin froze, repeating that he had told her countless times that he had never hated Helena. Her voice trembling, she asked what, then, was that all about in the garden with his aide the night before the wedding. A heavy silence hung in the air. Our girl stood there, her fists clenched, a cold fury burning in her eyes. Benjamin asked if she had heard everything, his own voice trembling, and her reply came like a whip. She retorted that he should have been more careful about what he said then. Then she turned away, but he saw her eyelashes tremble. Helena let out a bitter chuckle, saying she must have been a fool to try so hard after hearing that. Benjamin reached out to call his wife to continue their talk, but she whirled around and snapped that he was not to call her that anymore. She declared that she refused to be his wife. Benjamin's face twisted in pain, but she was no longer looking at him. He screamed her name, begging her to stop. His cries were a desperate attempt to halt the inevitable, but it was too late. So, the day of the charity bazaar and masquerade ball arrived, and the celebration was in full swing. Outside, excited ladies marveled. Was that really the cutting technique from the Age of Magic? The guests marveled at the statue brought from the family treasury. It was a gift Helena's father had made a long time ago, and one guest exclaimed that he wanted to bid on it. The heroine was glad the weather was cooperating for the event. Everything would have been much calmer if Benjamin hadn't pulled his stunt. The thought troubled her. Perhaps Helena had gone too far, reminding him of that conversation from the night before the wedding, despite being the Empress's spy. She was conflicted. Instead of digging up Benjamin's weaknesses, she was reviving Ishpein and stirring up trouble. Her musings were interrupted by a polite bow. The appearance of Duchess Muriel Russell was a surprise. Lady Helena welcomed her warmly, and the Duchess commented that the Countess of Ishpein must be tired from planning all this. Helena, spotting Benjamin in the distance, confessed to her friend that she didn't want to run into her husband right now. She added that she was so angry right now that if she saw his face, she was afraid she would forgive him. The Duchess chuckled softly, saying that when you see your spouse's dejected face, you can't help but forgive them. The heroine replied that yes, but she didn't want to forgive him right now, especially after going through all this because of her husband. The Duchess said that if that was the case, she would be happy to help. Suddenly, Helena had a wild idea and asked if she could swap costumes with her. At the masquerade ball, Benjamin looked around. There were fairy maids, demon wings could be seen, and paper crowns. This was pure madness, he concluded to himself. Then his thoughts drifted back to the pre-wedding ball. Did Helena hear everything back then? The guy wondered. And even so, she still offered her support. Benjamin searched the crowd for his wife. She had specifically said she would be wearing a cat mask, but he couldn't find anyone who looked like Helena. Suddenly, the ball's guests burst into laughter, gasping and exclaiming how cute and funny the little duck was. Everyone was desperate to know who it could be, but Benjamin knew at once, and he walked straight up to the little duck. He grabbed its wing and asked if he could have a word with Helena. The little duck flinched and quacked that it wasn't that person at all, quack. The guy smirked, then picked up the little duck, slung it over his shoulder, and apologized to everyone, asking for a precious minute of their time, as he really needed to talk. The guests began to whisper that the guy was completely insane. The little duck demanded to be put down at once, as she was not some piece of luggage. Finally, the little duck's feet touched the ground. Benjamin asked if he was satisfied now. Helena's voice rang out, asking how the boy knew it was her. He just said there were ways to tell. Then he grabbed the top of the costume, looking like he was about to rip it off. The girl was furious, asking what he thought he was doing. Benjamin politely asked her to take off the ridiculous outfit. He explained that he couldn't even concentrate on talking. Helena said, did he expect her to strip right here? Benjamin panicked, asking what she was wearing underneath. The little duck yelled, what did he think? She was wearing underwear, of course. Benjamin snapped that he got it, so she could stop mentioning it. He told Helena she didn't have to take off the costume, just talk. Helena huffed, asking what there was to talk about. She was still angry and didn't want to talk about anything. Benjamin told her to wait. Just then, the music started. The guests were excited, saying that the cute little duck and the cat count were going to waltz. Benjamin pointed out that everyone was watching them, and wasn't Helena going to do something about it? He asked, very sarcastically, if she didn't love living up to expectations. Helena asked if the guy even knew how to waltz. He just said all dances were the same damn thing. Then she stomped hard on his foot. Benjamin cried out in pain. The girl announced that from now on, he had better get used to doing things her way. She emphasized the point firmly, and the guests were all saying, oh, how sweet. What a touching moment. The heroine thought to herself that every time she saw Benjamin, she realized how damn handsome he was. He was standing right in front of her now, and her heart was starting to pound again. Of course, her anger had already subsided, but Benjamin still unexpectedly apologized to Helena. He added that he wanted to first apologize for his thoughtless words before the wedding. Benjamin noted that he would have been angry too if he had heard something like that, but he explained that the Ispahan earldom really did need money at the time, adding that he didn't trust people, especially nobles. He confessed something terrible had once happened in the small hall, making it a place that couldn't be shown to guests. That was why he had locked it. Benjamin admitted he had acted on his own and apologized for it. Helena thought to herself that it was strange. He was opening up to her, and she should be happy, right? But these confessions only made her feel worse, because she had to carry out the Empress's orders and leave this place. She asked Benjamin in her mind what he planned to do once he had given her his heart. The young man said he couldn't tell Helena everything he had been through right now, but one day he would overcome it. The girl cut him off, saying he didn't have to say any more. In any case, the matter of the charity auction was settled. The heroine admitted that the situation on the eve of the wedding had indeed made her angry, but she hadn't taken it too much to heart. She added that that's just how arranged marriages are. But she felt sorry for Benjamin. What if there was a woman who was a better match for him? But he ended up with her instead. The guy had no idea what she was talking about. The girl concluded sadly that the couple was mismatched. They didn't align in conversation or timing. But Benjamin protested that he had never thought that. Helena pointed out that that was exactly why they didn't match, thinking to herself that Benjamin was incredibly naive. A person like him couldn't possibly be plotting a conspiracy that could threaten the security of the empire. So even if the heroine continued to look for clues, he'll be fine. I don't know if Benjamin will live alone or meet someone else, but it doesn't matter as long as he's happy. Helena asked if he was done saying what he wanted to say, because she wasn't angry anymore, so he didn't have to worry, and then moved away from Benjamin. But he grabbed her wing again, muttering that this wasn't over. The guy dragged her towards the exit of the hall. Helena resisted, shouting that they couldn't just leave the hall. She made it clear that even if the organizers were in masks and costumes, they couldn't disappear for that long. But Benjamin had already led the girl into the corridor, taken off his mask, and helped her remove the top part of her costume. Naturally, Helena was angry, demanding to know what was going on. But instead of answering, Benjamin gently and shyly planted a kiss on the girl's forehead. The girl, surprised and flustered, asked what on earth that was for. The young man said he didn't even know how it happened. He just did it because he wanted to. Helena was furious, asking if he was serious, kissing her, and then saying something like that. She asked if it wasn't out of affection, then what was it for? Was it just some lecherous impulse? But the guy became very embarrassed and confused, asking what sex. Helena declared that even if his hormones were raging, this kind of behavior was unacceptable, especially since they weren't in that kind of relationship. Benjamin was completely at a loss for what to do, so he acted on instinct and hugged Helena. He told her it wasn't like that. It was just his way of saying thank you. She pointed out that he had a rather strange way of expressing gratitude and asked if he thanked people like this everywhere. Benjamin immediately let go. He was indignant, asking if he would do something like this somewhere else. Anywhere. The heroine yelled that what he did was ridiculous. She announced that she was going back to the party, but the guy tried to stop her, begging her to stay. The young man shouted that they weren't done talking, but Helena didn't react to his shouts and kept running. Watching her heels disappear, Benjamin sighed sadly, thinking he would go crazy with a wife like this. That night, as the heroine was taking a bath, she thought about how smoothly everything had gone. Thankfully, the whole costume change and masquerade ball had been her own idea, but she began to wonder why the matter was bothering her so much. Helena remembered Benjamin's kiss and thought that it was no wonder she was so angry. It was all his fault that she was a complete mess now. She couldn't understand how that stupid idea had gotten into his head and what he was thinking. Suddenly, a very familiar voice called out to the heroine. She told Benjamin he had scared her and asked what he was doing here. He said it was late and time for bed. Then he wondered why Helena seemed so distracted, as if she hadn't heard him call her at all. She didn't know what to say and stammered that she wasn't thinking about anything. There was an awkward silence between them for a moment. Then Benjamin asked her for a towel. Helena looked confused, so he explained that he wanted to help dry her hair and asked her to sit down. He said the girl could consider this as a thank you for taking care of his hand last time. The guy assured Helena she would like it and told her to relax and read a book in the meantime. She agreed and pointed out that if he was so confident, then fine, she would stay right there. Benjamin smiled smugly, pointing out that she was holding her book upside down. The man added that the girl didn't have to be so nervous. He wasn't going to do anything bad. Helena retorted sharply that she wasn't thinking about that kind of thing at all. The man said that winter had arrived. These words made the protagonist start thinking about how much had happened since then. Helena recalled the first social ball held in Ishpein County, like the time she danced with the Count. This room was now even starting to feel like home. Benjamin had been carefully helping his wife dry her hair. Helena found herself thinking how peaceful it felt for them to be sitting like this. Her eyelids were getting heavier, and Benjamin, noticing she was dozing off, asked if she wanted to sleep. The protagonist just hummed vaguely in agreement. The man then told her she could rest for a while. He would finish drying her hair completely and then wake her up. The girl didn't argue and happily fell asleep. The man ran his hand through her hair one last time, thinking that it was probably dry by now. Then Benjamin decided to carry the sleeping Helena to bed and thought to himself, isn't she a bit too light? To be honest, he had never really noticed before how stunningly beautiful his wife was, or that she naturally smelled so good, as if she didn't need perfume at all. With a warm and gentle smile, he called Helena his wife and wished her sweet dreams. The morning in Ishpein County kicked off with a deafening scream. A newly awakened Benjamin groggily asked Helena what on earth had happened. The protagonist's voice was filled with venom as she declared that Benjamin Ishpein was never to dry her hair again. The guy couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then he calmed down a bit, apologized, and left. The man tried to hide his amusement, explaining that he didn't know if long, curly hair like that needed oil. Helena was infuriated, as if to say, of course, how would he know? This was just a fake marriage. Benjamin replied that the nature of the marriage was irrelevant. He still wouldn't know unless she bothered to explain it to him. She started yelling that that wasn't the point, that she was talking about something else, but the man simply ignored her and kissed her on the forehead. The protagonist was furious, but the guy explained it was his farewell before leaving. She couldn't calm down and angrily questioned what kind of farewell that was. He replied that it was normal for a married couple and reminded her that Helena had recently said she would support him no matter what, because they were a married couple now. He added that since that was the case, he would come home early tonight and called her my dear one last time. Helena was shocked, wondering why this guy was acting so shamelessly. That evening, the Count was greeted by the butler upon his return, who remarked that he had been coming home earlier and earlier lately. Benjamin replied that he just wanted to be home in time for dinner, and Wesley commented that he was happy to see his master like this. The Count asked if Lady Helena was in the castle, and upon hearing Wesley's affirmative answer, he threw open the front door and happily announced he was home. But the next second, his joy vanished, replaced by a look of horror on his face. The man asked, "What's with all this luggage?" He looked to his wife for an answer, but she just glared at him coldly. Finally, Helena broke the silence. She said she was going to Clasia in the north for a while. The man, shocked, couldn't believe his ears and asked her to say it again. But when she said it again, he asked if this wasn't a bit too sudden and if something had happened at the Gripia sugarcane plantation. Helena explained that she had just spoken with the sugar expert, Marari, at the Gripia plantation a few hours ago. She had asked if she was really suggesting they start a new sugarcane plantation in Barwood right now. Marari said that for now, they could get sugarcane from Gripia. But she declared that Barwood can't rely on Gripia for raw materials forever, so they need their own independent plantation. See, she said, the Ishpein family has already screwed us over once, so, as a professional, I have the right to make this request. The protagonist explained to Benjamin that this was precisely why establishing that new sugarcane plantation was a must. She added that there were still some issues in Barwood that needed to be resolved first. Lord Gripia said it would be helpful to check out the corn farms in the Clasia region, so I'm heading there. Benjamin, very worried, asked how long she would be gone. She explained that to get to Clasia, she first had to go to the Duchy of Roussel and then transfer at the North Gate. Also, the Duchess of Roussel had promised to send a carriage for the return trip. Helena would be staying at the Duke of Roussel's estate for a while. She planned to take her time, travel leisurely, and stay in luxury hotels. Since it was such a long trip, she would make a detour to the Winston family's mansion in Duras. Benjamin pointed out that this would be a very long journey. Helena thought to herself that her relationship with her husband seemed to have gotten much closer recently. She schemed to use this opportunity to ditch Benjamin and told him he was probably right. She added that while she was away, Benjamin should make sure the castle wasn't left completely unattended. But before she could finish, the man blurted out that he was going with her. Helena was furious. Was Benjamin really going to follow her like a lost puppy? Isn't the situation with the new territory urgent? That's an important matter. The young man retorted that this was just as important, because he couldn't let her suddenly go so far away alone. Helena grabbed the man's hand and ordered him to come with her. After finding a secluded spot to be alone, she asked the young man in a stern tone if he was aware that he had been acting really strange lately. Benjamin asked in surprise, and she said, yes, like how he suddenly wanted to dry her hair, or how he started coming home way too regularly. She even mentioned the masquerade ball, and then said she wanted to ask something, just in case it was important, so the man must answer truthfully. Benji got nervous, and Helena asked if he actually liked her. The guy said he thought she wanted to pretend to be a loving couple, so he was just playing along. She seemed satisfied with this answer, so he wasn't doing it because he had feelings for her. Suddenly, Benji said, hey, if you don't like this, we could go back to how things were before. She retorted, that's not what I meant, and I like being on good terms with you. She concluded, the point is, I know you're not acting on feelings, so that's what matters. She turned away, muttering that having him along was better than being alone, so I guess it's fine if we travel together. Helena laid down the rules, saying that on this trip, everything was her way. Just in case, she warned him not to even think about falling in love with her, because she would never fall for him. Benji agreed to everything, saying that was a completely ridiculous worry. The girl said if everything was clear and there were no more questions, then he should pack his bags as quickly as possible. We're leaving right away. Then she left, leaving the man to his heavy-hearted thoughts. For Benjamin and Helena, that conversation was a kind of promise, but it was so foolish. Everyone knows that the more you deny something, the more it proves that something has already begun. For both of them, the protagonist wouldn't realize this fact until the end of this long journey. The carriage wheels turned, blurring the scenery outside, as Helena and Benjamin played cards inside the carriage. The girl slammed her cards on the table, slapped it with her hand, and shouted that she wasn't playing anymore. Not playing anymore. The man asked if she was really going to just give up the game, even though she was losing. Helena called him an idiot, saying that's exactly why she wasn't playing, because she was losing. Benjamin asked if she really hated losing that much. Helena retorted that she was just bored. The guy reminded her that she was the one who wanted to play this game, and now she was acting like a total jerk. Suddenly, their guard yanked open the door and announced that the carriage had arrived at Baron Main's territory. Benjamin jumped down first, told Helena to take her time, then apologized and asked if he could hold her by the waist. The girl felt the same racing heart she felt during the kiss and thought, not again. She asked the man what he was doing. Benjamin said the sun was too bright, and he was just shielding her from it. Helena pointed out that the sun was about to set, but they should at least get an umbrella. She added that actually the young man might be right. As our heroes stepped out of the carriage, they were greeted by cheerful laughter, with someone exclaiming how wonderful the young couple's relationship was. The same voice welcomed them to Baron Mayon's territory. He said that even though the Count and Countess were only staying for one night, he hoped they would be comfortable. The Countess thanked Baron Mayon for the invitation, saying it meant they could truly relax and travel comfortably. The Baron waved it off, saying it was nothing, and oh, by the way, he had prepared a small banquet to celebrate their arrival. The evening at Baron Mayon's was pleasant, and the protagonist stepped outside, plopped down on a bench, and enjoyed the cool night breeze. Benjamin appeared out of nowhere, draped a blanket over her shoulders, and asked what she was doing out here. She explained she just wanted to sober up before bed, and the man couldn't help but notice her strange behavior during dinner. Benjamin said she seemed to be acting tonight, being unusually friendly, completely different from her usual self. She retorted that it was a reception, so of course she had to at least be polite, then asked if that was sarcasm or a compliment. Benjamin said it was definitely a compliment, then mused that he sometimes couldn't tell where the acting ended and the real Helena began. She shrugged, asking who can really show only one side of themselves, and claimed she was just an ordinary person. He commented that not everyone could be that skillful, which made Helena special. A hint of sadness flashed in her eyes as she thought to herself that she was like her mother, who was a rather famous dancer back in the day. Her voice cracked a little, but she continued, saying she was talking about her birth mother, the woman who abandoned her. There was a moment of silence, but Helena eventually broke it, guessing he probably didn't know all this. She clarified that the woman Benjamin met at the wedding was not her biological mother. Helena's birth mother's name was Sandra, and she was a truly amazing dancer. There was even a mural of her in the Girardi Theater. She admitted she didn't know much about her, but apparently her mom was a very free spirit. Guess she couldn't stand married life and ran away. Can't really blame her. It happens all the time, right? I guess that's the reality of romantic love, isn't it? She told him not to think she had a tragic childhood. Her father and stepmother were good people. Suddenly, Helena pointed to the sky and shouted, "Did you see that shooting star over there?" Benjamin made a mental note of the girl's pathetic attempt to change the subject to end this awkward confession. She said she should have made a wish, but was met with silence. Helena cautiously called the young man's name, and after a minute of silence, he replied that he clearly didn't know much about her. The girl replied that it was normal. After all, they had a hasty, arranged marriage. Helena placed her palm on Benjamin's cheek, adding that she knew almost nothing about her husband either. He took her hand and thanked her for telling him this. The protagonist thought that maybe now was a good time to ask Benjamin about himself, but the words died on her lips. Suddenly, the man pulled the girl into a tight hug, and she asked if this gesture was also out of gratitude. Benjamin said he thought Helena must have had a hard time too. The girl wondered if he was making fun of her now. Benjamin explained it was just a form of comfort. So the protagonist had been thinking seriously. In fact, Sandra had run away with her daughter. At that time, there were rumors in the capital that Sandra had fallen in love with an imperial knight, but everyone thought it was just a fling. No one expected her to give up her title as a countess, let alone run away with her daughter. Sandra abandoned little Helena on the side of the road. The girl was found in front of a monastery. She had a high fever, and when the little one woke up, she was back at the Winston family estate. Perhaps because of that severe illness, Helena remembered nothing of what happened before. The reason was obvious. The little girl kept thinking what a burden she was, especially after she got sick. From then on, she decided to be happy no matter what, even if she had to do it on her own. But Benjamin just had to come in and mess up her plans. Seriously, when did she start feeling warm and secure around this man? Helena kept telling herself to cast aside these feelings and get a grip, but she could no longer bring herself to talk nonsense to him. She wondered why she even brought it up. Maybe she was really drunk, but whatever, it was all in the past. Suddenly, the man turned to Helena and started to say he had feelings too, but she cut him off, telling him, "Don't say anything, not now." She explained a reason to herself. If she heard his secret now, she would never be able to use it against him. The protagonist kissed him unexpectedly. He grinned and asked, was it that bad? She said she did it without thinking, but definitely not because she liked him. She asked if Benjamin understood what she meant, and he shook his head, saying he didn't understand at all, so she needed to keep going. Then he got serious and asked why she did it, if it was just an impulse. Helena smiled smugly and asked if he was getting back at her, and he said maybe. She explained she just wanted to shut him up, that's all. Benjamin pointed out that using a kiss to shut someone up was a strange move, but Helena retorted that it was a perfectly normal way to make someone shut up. The man asked if she would really do it again, because he would like to shut her up too when she said something annoying. The protagonist, breathless, whispered that this was wrong, that he was misunderstanding something, and then she whispered his name. At this point, he finally said, yes, she was right, it seemed that way. She reminded him that she had warned him she wouldn't fall in love. Benjamin replied that he would do the same, and Helena asked if he was serious. The man assured her he was, and just like that, even knowing it was a lie and sensing how it would end, the protagonist still wanted to take it further, and she really never intended to fall in love. And so, dawn broke over Baron Mayon's territory. Helena didn't want to wake up, mumbling for just a few more minutes. It was too warm here. A few minutes later, Benjamin told her it was time to get up. Then he called Helena, my dear, and wished her a good morning. She woke up with a splitting headache, vaguely remembering last night. The girl shyly mumbled a good morning, covering her face with the sheets to hide from the bright light and her shame. Memories came flooding back. They had kissed several more times last night, and the thought of it made her face flush. That night, Helena had mentally drooled over Benjamin's firm chest, snuggling into his arms, and thinking it was the perfect place to fall asleep. This morning, our girl woke up in a panic, realizing she had just passed out. It was all this damn alcohol's fault. Helena thought for a moment and decided her behavior that night was definitely a number 2. Our protagonist has her own love dictionary. You see, number 1 is just a light kiss. Number 2 is a deep kiss, and the final number means, you know. She whispered that it was definitely a number 2, feeling her heart race. She knew what they say, it's only one step from number 2 to the final number. But Helena was sure that for her and Benjamin, the final number was too soon. She suddenly realized they were married, and the final number was perfectly acceptable. So Helena shut her eyes tight, lay down, and thought she was ready. Suddenly, there was a scream. Helena leaped out of bed and asked what that was. Was that a woman's scream? Benjamin said he would go check. He carefully opened the window and closely observed the unusual creature. The man looked at the giant bird, relieved, noting that it looked a bit strange, but thankfully it wasn't a monster. My goodness, Benjamin said in complete surprise, I've never seen such a big bird. Helena came closer for a look and gasped, me neither. I'll go get ready first, he announced. Then Helena remembered a certain socialite saying that it's always hard to go from the first step to the second. But from the second step to the finish line, that's the easy part. For some reason, our protagonist just smiled smugly. And so, the group continued their journey. Benjamin sat next to the coachman, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The Count told the guy to just ignore it, saying he was comfortable himself. But the coachman thought, that's easy for you to say, I'm the one who's uncomfortable. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, the protagonist was speechless with anger. She complained that the guy had been acting weird all morning, like a little girl, even avoiding Helena's gaze, and now he dared to leave her all alone in here. She snapped that they shouldn't have come together in the first place, even though no one forced him. However, when the couple arrived at Leyland's, near the portal, Benjamin suddenly offered, if you feel sick, you can grab onto me. Helena admitted she felt like throwing up. The young man grinned and said, in that case, I'll change into something else. But the couple was still holding hands after activating the portal and teleporting. The characters continued their journey. Helena stared at her husband, who had unexpectedly sat down next to her, and asked, why are you sitting on my side? The girl was clearly trying to hide her embarrassment with feigned seriousness. Benjamin lowered his head and mumbled that he was just worried about her, even though they had already rested at the portal. She raised an eyebrow and retorted with barely concealed accusation, noting that he had been pointedly avoiding her until now. He admitted he felt awkward this morning. Helena sighed and said gently, after last night, that's completely understandable. He vaguely agreed, looking up at her for the first time today, and speculated with a hint of hurt in his tone that she didn't seem to care at all. Helena's brow furrows immediately, and she snapped, where did he get the idea that she didn't care? She declared that she was bothered by it too. Benjamin's cheeks flushed, and he was about to say something, but the coachman knocked on the carriage window and announced they had arrived indoors. The Count and Countess were greeted by a beautiful winter city decorated with festive lights. Helena exclaimed with delight, momentarily forgetting her embarrassment. It's so beautiful here. Benjamin asked if Helena really liked it here that much. The girl retorted angrily, asking why he would ask that. She gushed that of course she liked it. Although she was born at the Winston estate, she spent most of her time here. The man watched happily as her eyes sparkled with excitement, and he promised they would come here more often, even after they went back, which surprised Helena at first. But then she agreed. Meanwhile, at the plantation, some people were locked in one of the sheds. But who were they? And what were they doing in there? Our heroes were now looking out over the endless fields of the North Clasia farm. The Count and Countess were stunned by the sheer size of the place, wondering how a single farm could cover so much land. The farm manager and experienced agronomist, Duran, began to talk about the local crops, with corn being the main one. But they also grew peanuts and rapeseed. The Countess wondered if rapeseed was bad for the soil, as it was used as both a spice and a dye. Duran laughed and explained that's exactly why they planted it alongside peanuts, which are excellent for restoring soil fertility. Thanks to his special fertilizer, soil depletion wasn't even a problem anymore. The smell around the fertilizer plant was quite unpleasant, just as the foreman had warned our heroes. But the guests weren't deterred. They were actually very eager to go see the place right away. The visit to the Klusia farm was actually very helpful. Helena was very excited, saying she had learned a lot about cultivation and fertilizer production. She planned to apply this knowledge to the sugarcane plantation in Barwood immediately. So this long trip was definitely worth it. Although Benjamin acted as if he didn't care, you could tell he was actually listening to everything with rapt attention. He was definitely no sweetheart, but at least he had no false pride, which was one of his few virtues. Suddenly, the Countess's thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash as a man carrying a basket fell. She asked if he was all right. The foreman yelled at the fallen man, telling him to watch where he was going. Helena gasped in shock and asked Lord Duran what was happening. The foreman said nonchalantly that he was just a slave and not worth making a fuss over. He began to strongly persuade the Countess to also use slaves to increase productivity. He was particularly keen on using the godforsaken, cheap, and easy-to-manage arcane people. The Count bent down to help a fallen slave, which naturally displeased the overseer immensely. Then, he turned to the slaves and started shouting, calling them stupid arcane people and urging them to work faster. The protagonist turned to Duran with a stern face and announced that they had seen enough of the farm and it was time to go back. The overseer, with a professional smile on his face, nodded and said he would prepare for their departure as soon as possible. As soon as Duran left, Helena knelt down to help Benjamin. She noticed he was bleeding and offered the young man a handkerchief, but Benjamin rudely refused. He said he didn't need it, then stood up and walked away. Then, with a thud, Helena fell to the ground, gasping Benjamin's name and begging him to wait. Benjamin, calm but tense, asked if she was all right. Helena complained that she had taken a nasty fall and gotten her dress dirty. Embarrassed and upset, she confessed that she didn't want anyone to see her in such a sorry state. She suggested they cancel their plan to visit the castle and return to the inn where they had stayed the previous night. He understood how she felt and simply nodded in agreement. Later, Benjamin carefully examined her injury and found it wasn't serious, just a minor wrist sprain. He offered to apply some ointment and bandage it for her, but she waved it off, saying it was nothing and insisted he take care of himself first, assuring him she was fine. After he finished treating her wound, he suddenly asked Helena why she had fallen on purpose. She hesitated, but admitted she felt that if she hadn't intervened, something bad might have happened. Benjamin dropped a bombshell on Helena, confessing that he owed a debt to the arcane people and couldn't just stand by and watch them suffer. Completely caught off guard, Helena asked him what he meant by that debt. This guy couldn't understand treating the arcane people as slaves just because they were called sinners. The heroine reminded Benjamin that he had once defeated a monster from the White Sea while in the army, a squid-like monster. She explained that the monster forest and the White Sea were direct consequences of the arcane people's sins, for which the Empire was still paying the price. Although she said she wasn't justifying the farm manager's practice of enslavement, her words undoubtedly struck a nerve. He sharply cut her off, telling her never to call the arcane people slaves in front of him again. Benjamin stormed towards the exit, and Helena desperately called for him to wait. But he didn't even slow down, let alone look back. The door slammed shut in front of Helena. Unbeknownst to Helena, at that very moment, Benjamin was being haunted by childhood memory. They had told him it was inevitable because they were arcane, they were sinners. Benjamin opened the barn door and, in an urgent voice, ordered the people crowded inside to run. He told them to find the orc tribe and ask for a healer in the lowest place, who would show them the way to the dungeons. After the heat died down, Benjamin told them to come find him at Count Ishpein's castle, promising them a place to live in peace. But first, they had to lose their pursuers. Benjamin took out a box of matches, struck one, and suddenly threw it. Cries of fire erupted, creating the chaos they needed. After all this, Helena could finally savor the peace she had earned, waking up feeling immensely content. A maid server rose due tea, and Helena eagerly picked up the cup, took a sip, and sighed in satisfaction. She whispered that she had finally found what she wanted, and, as she savored her favorite drink, she thought to herself that this was the life Helena Winston deserved. When a pile of new dresses was delivered to the room, Helena was surprised, as she had never seen them before. The maid explained that Mrs. Winston had specially ordered these outfits for her daughter. Helena tried on the dresses one by one, loving each one and finding them completely her style, but it was hard to choose just one. After she put one on, the maid gushed about how stunning she looked in it, saying Helena had become even more beautiful. In this touching moment, Helena suddenly recalled everything she had gone through after they were separated, such as the time she had to disguise herself as a man, like wearing a duck costume and masquerade ball, and falling into a mud pit, but now all those difficult times were over. In her heart, she bid farewell to those hard days and now felt true happiness. Since marrying Count Ishpein, Helena's relationship with her husband had become noticeably closer, and everyone had taken note. Returning to Duras would be a huge spectacle, and rumors were already flying. The maid mentioned Sir Stan, who had once been head over heels for Helena, and word on the street was that he had abandoned his fiancée the moment he heard she was back. Helena just scoffed, saying all her old flames had run off after the Rufus scandal. The topic shifted to Count Benjamin, who, according to Helena, wouldn't waste his time on such nonsense. Because he was obsessed with his duty to the arcane people, but it was more than just an obligation. Who would have thought he would actually help slaves escape? Although Helena admitted to herself that she was the one who had pushed him to do it. Now the pathetic, mustache-twirling little man and his master were probably furious. Just as they were chatting, the maid announced that everything was ready. When the governesses saw Helena's new outfit and hairstyle, they couldn't help but shower her with praise, saying how beautiful the madam was. Lady Helena suddenly asked where her husband was, and the maid informed her that Count Ishpein was taking a walk with Count Winston in the orangery. Hearing this, Helena couldn't hide her surprise. It was clear that her husband's meeting with her father stirred up complex emotions in her. Count Winston admitted that deep down he had always been worried, but now seeing his daughter and son-in-law getting along so well, he felt much more at peace. Count Ishpein said he felt bad that his wife had to suffer because of his many shortcomings. Count Winston commented that he used to think his son-in-law was a cold person, but now he realized he was wrong. He then added that since he was now his daughter's husband, he would from now on regard him as a son. Suddenly, Ishpein gathered his courage and asked about Helena's mother. He explained that his wife had recently told him about her birth mother, and he wanted to learn more to understand her better. Count Winston was surprised that Helena would even talk about Sandra. Ishpein added that although his wife rarely spoke of it, sometimes at night she would call for her mother and cry in her sleep, while during the day she acted completely calm and carefree. Winston noted that was exactly her style, and Ishpein confessed that was precisely why he wanted to know more about her mother. It was the only way to truly understand Helena. He apologized if his questions were perhaps too intrusive, but Count Winston countered that there was nothing inappropriate about them at all. He then added thoughtfully that some might think he regretted loving Sandra, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Count Winston began to tell the story of his runaway wife. Sandra had appeared in high society out of nowhere, a peerless beauty, while he was just an ordinary, dull man. Even so, his feelings for her were genuine, and he never missed a single one of her performances. He tried everything to talk to her, and finally worked up the courage to confess his feelings, offering her a rose. To his surprise, Sandra magically accepted his rose, and in that moment, he fell head over heels in love with her. Their relationship took off like a rocket. They loved each other with all their hearts, and over time, the Count got to know her more deeply. But he gradually began to notice that Sandra was hiding something. He waited patiently for the day she would finally trust him enough to confide her secret, loving her with all his heart despite her mysteries. Count Winston painfully admitted that the day Sandra revealed her secret never came. In the end, that day never came, and she left him, disappearing like smoke in the wind as suddenly as she had appeared. When Ishpein asked if he had ever tried to find Sandra, the Count replied that he had tried everything, but it was all in vain. He shared his thought that the reason for her disappearance might be related to the secret she never revealed. Now we can never know the truth for sure, Winston concluded regretfully. He asked Ishpein to keep this conversation a secret from Helena and his current wife, so as not to burden them with the pain of a difficult past. The conversation ended with Count Winston concluding that his worries were for nothing and entrusting Count Ishpein to take good care of Helena. Suddenly, the shouts of children grew closer, wanting to see Count Ishpein too. It turned out to be Helena's younger siblings running over, and a cheerful Appa rang out, but was immediately corrected by their strict and proper older sister, who said Ira should call him brother-in-law, not Appa. Then some guy shouted brother-in-law excitedly. The topic turned to Henry, who was told he must call the Count brother-in-law. The boy repeated like an obedient little soldier, brother-in-law. Helena said, stepmother is waiting for us in the banquet hall. Why are we all still here? Count Winston said in surprise, wow, is it that late already? He told everyone to hurry, or they'd have to listen to her complain throughout breakfast. The joke amused everyone. Benjamin thought to himself that these were all good, kind people and felt he shouldn't disturb them, so he decided to slip away quietly. Helena spotted Benjamin trying to slip away and stopped him in his tracks. Hey, what do you think you're going all by yourself? She declared that he wasn't getting away from her and pulled Count Ishpein along, insisting that a family should always stay together.